across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good evening. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. There's so much to talk about between now and 10 o'clock, and I want to make sure I get your voice on air on the big issues of the day. We'll be talking about all sorts of things, including what's been going on in Michigan, that shooter at a synagogue. Thankfully, he's now dead. There's only been one injury reported, but terror has been spreading in that area, not just with Jewish people, but with people right across that area in Detroit. So we'll get the latest from there. We hope there's a reporter on the ground we're hoping to speak to as soon as he can, and we'll get reaction here in the UK as well. We'll also talk about Peter Mandelson. What did the Prime Minister know, and when? Is he telling the full truth? Is he telling us everything that we need to know on this? He's been in Northern Ireland today and is heading off to the Republic of Ireland as well. We'll talk about Iran's new Supreme Leader, who's apparently in a coma and has lost a leg after being seriously injured in airstrikes, according to reports. We've got the debate desk for the fourth day. We're going to have it every night on this programme. Shimmy and Lee and Sebastian Selleck will be on the debate desk this evening, and we'll take your calls if you want to give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Hundreds of GPs saying they've never refused a sick note on mental health grounds as well. The Home Office refusing to reveal how many failed asylum seeker families have accepted the money they're being bribed to leave Britain. And the one that I'm interested in as well, which is an air ambulance charity trying to put out an awareness campaign about women and CPR and how to remove bras and make sure that people have correct CPR if they're having a heart attack or another illness. Well, Facebook has taken it down because there's a mannequin which shows bare breasts. Yes, really. So much to discuss between now and 10 o'clock. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call to get your voice on the air and let me know your opinion on the stories that matter to you. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a WhatsApp text message, send me a WhatsApp voice message, less than a minute please, to the main number. You can also ring me on the main number, which is 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss here on Talk between now and 10 o'clock. Well, let's talk about what's happening in Michigan in the United States. The gunman is dead after crashing his car into a Jewish synagogue, into a temple in Michigan. The sheriff has been talking about this in the area. This is what he's been saying.
Okay, so again, this is all going to be super preliminary stuff. And anytime you have a situation like this, information changes and evolves. Here's what we know so far. A car came to the facility, breached the facility by driving into it, was engaged by security. We believe there is one individual deceased in the vehicle. It's been complicated because there was some fire, to say the least, with that vehicle. We believe that individual is deceased. No kids, this is the important thing, no kids or no staff was injured whatsoever. Okay? So we have no victims other than one of the lead security people was hit by the car and was taken to the hospital for treatment. That individual should be okay. So far, that's our information to this point.
So minor injuries to one of the security guards who was attempting to guard the synagogue. We know that so many synagogues here in the UK as well and around the world need round-the-clock security because of the threat that is posed. So we think only the shooter himself is dead, and what sounds like a reasonably minor injury should pull through, should be okay in regard to the security guard. There's a lot around as well on Iran. We're going to talk to Nicole Lampert about that, and another very concerning story here at home as well in regard to Iran. Nicole Lampert is a journalist and campaigner against anti-Semitism. Nicole, just your reaction to what's happening in Michigan.
Well, it's the latest kind of attack that we've seen on a synagogue, and actually it's very similar playbook to what happened in Manchester, which is this is a synagogue that was already, it was thought to be protected in that it obviously had a security gate, had a security guard. I guess the key difference is that probably their security guard had a gun, and thankfully no one was injured. So, you know, that is relief. There is apparently also an attack on a synagogue tonight in Norway. I haven't had that confirmed yet. There's been shootings at synagogues have been shot at in Canada. There's been no one injured, but there's been 3 of those in the last few days. And obviously we know what happened in Manchester, and we know what happened in Bondi Beach. So it all feels very frightening, and the certainly the terror alert level has gone up a notch since the Iran war started. The IRGC and the Iranians have basically said, it's a free for all, both on Jewish communities around the world and also dissident Iranians. So it all feels very frightening, to be honest.
That is certainly the message coming from the Supreme Leader. We think that the new Supreme Leader is in a coma, has lost a leg after being seriously injured in airstrikes. He may even be dead. But what the message coming from him is hate-filled bile as well. He says as well that Iran is only attacking American and Israeli targets. Well, they used a cluster bomb on Israeli civilians previously, which is a particularly brutal form of warfare. I mean, it is absolutely clear that Iran is, they would say defending themselves, but being very aggressive towards Israelis and other players in the region still as this war continues, Nicole.
Well, exactly. And obviously, we have to be careful with what we say, but last week there were 4 arrests of Iranian or British Iranian nationals for apparently, making alleged plans to hurt the local Jewish community. One of them was arrested just up the road from my own mother's house. So it does feel that while it's already been a dangerous time for Jews since October 7, it's become more frightening. And the fact that this is the person they've chosen as their new supreme leader, who almost farcically may not even be awake to make these pronouncements, but the fact that they chose this person who's particularly hardline, some say even more hardline than his own father, and he's vowed to avenge the martyrs and to attack any Israeli, any American sites, including on fellow Muslims during Ramadan.
What do you make of this slightly weird statement? We are not an enemy of the countries around us. We are only targeting the bases of those Americans. I mean, that's factually wrong and demonstrably untrue to everybody in the region.
Yes, but what's quite interesting is that they attack their own friends. They attack Saudi Arabia, Qatar, even Turkey. And it's almost like someone was kind of let loose with their missiles and just shot them at everyone. So these are people that were, certainly Saudi Arabia was becoming closer to Iran. Iran and Qatar also had kind of similar links, and also Iran and Turkey were also seen as a kind of close to each other. So suddenly, by attacking these countries, they're stepping back and they're like, what on earth is going on? And so it's really upended the whole of the Middle East and who was friends with who, and it's kind of sent them all back into the arms of the Americans, which of course is not what they want.
How do you feel from your perspective here, Nicole, that the war is going? Because we've had these slightly confused messages from America. Donald Trump saying it's coming to an end. Pete Hegseth saying it could last a lot longer. They're only getting started. And you have Britain being drawn further and further in with attacks on Cyprus, obviously British bases in Cyprus, and you've got the fact that HMS Dragon is on its way there. I just wonder what your general sense of how this is going and how long it will last is.
Yeah, you've also got the whole kind of worldwide economy element.
Of course.
Because of the Straits of Hormuz and what the Iranians are doing there, trying to stop oil coming through, which is going to have an impact on all of us. So and they're doing that to pressure Donald Trump to stop. So I have spent some time with some Iranians this week. I hosted a launch with Lord Warney he's looking at charities in the UK that are basically often closely connected to the IRGC.
Yes, he's done a big report on that, hasn't he, Lord Walney?
Exactly. So I spoke to some Iranians there, and I think they all feel, and I think probably Israel feels and America feels that they have to make it as easy as possible for the Iranians themselves to then implement regime change. And so they want it to go on for as long as possible. So one Iranian woman that I spoke to had spoken to her family in Tehran, and she said the only time they were terrified is when the bombing stopped for 10 hours and they were like, please don't say this is finished. We don't want this war to be finished yet.
It says so much, doesn't it, Nicole, that you've got people who actually want their country to be bombed, people in Iran who were welcoming the bombs, even though there's obviously death, destruction and civilian casualties as well. But that just shows the desperation of those people to get rid of this horrendous regime, doesn't it?
Exactly, and if they don't get rid of him, then the new supreme leader is even more hardline. And we know what his father did, which was just in January, killed around 40,000 demonstrators. We don't know the exact numbers, but over the space of a weekend for demonstrating. Then the people know that if they don't help, they have the help of the outside world, it's going to get even more hard for them. There's going to be even more murders. So they want this to go on, and what they really want is for anything to do with the regime to be attacked, the IRGC in particular, but any of their military, to help them help themselves. And
just to get a snapshot of some of those horrendous human rights abuses that were happening in Iran, the 12th of February, the US-based group Human Rights Activist News Agency announced that at least 7,000 people had been killed in Iran, including 219 children. Anti-regime campaigners say ultimately up to 30,000 protesters may have been murdered. And what was happening the same day? Well, Foreign Office staff from the Foreign Common and Development Office here in the UK civil servants, which we pay for as taxpayers, they were attending a party at the Iranian embassy to celebrate the Islamic Revolution, just weeks after the regime massacred thousands of its own people. UK civil servants, video footage is there, showing them standing in silence for a rendition of Iran's national anthem. Now, sometimes there are civil servants, there are diplomats who have to put up with what goes on, but they didn't need to attend that reception. And not just at the time, but particularly since, it stinks. It's horrendous.
Yeah, I mean, we're one of the few countries that hasn't outright prescribed the IRGC. Even Europe, which for many years have been pushing against that idea, they very quickly, all of a sudden, just a week or so ago, prescribed them. And once they are prescribed, it's much easier to then really have a look at what they're doing in our country and stop it. But because for some reason our government, even though the Labour Party had it in their manifesto that they were going to prescribe them, and they still haven't. And incredibly, even now they've started a war against us. They still haven't prescribed them or thrown out their ambassador.
And people who support the IRGC and support the Iranian regime can still congregate, not march, but apparently still congregate in this Al-Quds event. The government would have us believe that they've banned the march, and they have done that, but they can't ban a static protest. Is that correct?
Apparently they can't ban a static protest, and that kind of just shows sort of where we are, which is our liberal values are butting up against a regime or an ideology that is completely opposed to liberalism. And so they're using our own liberal values to worm their way around it so that they can push their hatred and their kind of adoration of this country that wants to destroy our country. And it feels quite mental, really, that we're sleeping, we're not awake to the danger. Even just the other day, I saw someone on the news, and he was trying, a newscaster who was blaming Iran's hatred of Israel on the Palestinian situation, and it's
for goodness sake,
no understanding that the Iranians, that the supreme leader, it's a kind of cultish idea that it almost seems too mad for us to believe. But they genuinely believe that until Israel is destroyed, then their 12th Imam will not return. And that Israel has to be destroyed as part of their ideology and has nothing to do with Palestine.
Ridiculous. Listen, thank you so much, Nicole, as always. Nicole Lambert there, who is a journalist and campaigner against anti-Semitism. Tad's been in touch and says, evening, Peter. It'll be interesting to see where your programme goes tonight. I have a poignant question, please. In light of the anti-Semitic attacks in the US and elsewhere, precisely who are the real racists? Unless we do something about the intolerant ones who seek our destruction, who will be next, says Tad. Well, I always make that point. It's a good point to make. And I made the point the other night when there was an Islamist in one of our panelists, one of our debate desk panelists, is a counsellor, and in that area there was an Islamist attack, or at least protest, against people celebrating Holi, the Hindu festival. Hindu festival of Holi, which is a very, very fun thing actually, but there were Islamists who were not happy with this and were protesting against it, and indeed allegedly attacking someone who was taking part in that. So it's not just Jews, it's not just Hindus, it's Christians, it's everybody, because the Western way of life is something that Islamists do not like. And you're absolutely right, Tad, your thoughts are completely in the correct direction there, because it is about a way of life. It's not just about religion. That's part of it, but the way of life is part of it too. Dawn says, Peter, I find it unbelievable that Jewish people are being targeted both here and around the world. Jews are not a threat to society. What has happened to humans, says Dawn. Sadly, it's all too believable. And Chris in Epsom has some thoughts on this as well. Chris has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Chris, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter.
Hi there.
A fair bit. I'll try and do it as quickly as possible. First of all, we've got to be careful we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. The right to the free right to assembly is a constitutional right, and I fear that if everybody's shouting for it to be banned completely, they'll rush some legislation through because they're frightened to death of the May the 16th gathering. Now, the thing is that the police have been moaning that it's down to the Home Office. The Home Office have now banned it. Now, they can gather. Now, because it's an assembly, the police can tell them where and when they can gather. Mm-hmm. They can fence it as well. And if they order a Section 60 AA, what that means is that the police can then ask for anybody to remove their face covering. Mm-hmm. If they don't remove their face covering, it's an instant arrest.
That's correct.
1 month and or £1,000 fine.
Okay.
Also, people that are saying, what about marching there? All right. People, two or more people marching with a common agenda to go to that place, right, could be arrested for marching. So there can be no carrying of flags, groups coming from stations. The police need to police this heavily and show what they should have done with the Palestine Freedom Mile, Free Palestine marches every Saturday that we put up with for 2 years. There is a lot of hatred coming from certain elements of the Muslim world, the Islamists and the Iranian supporters.
So I don't disagree with anything you're saying, Chris. There's a lot of factual information in there. My point is, I suppose, which kind of adds to what you're saying, is why is the IRGC not a prescribed organisation, and why is support for the Iranian regime not seen as a crime within that if you're supporting the IRGC? Because if you're at one of those pro-Palestinian marches and you're holding a banner saying I support Hamas, which is a prescribed terrorist organisation, as is Hezbollah, well then you can be arrested for that reason because you're supporting a terrorist organisation, prescribed organisation. But the point is that, I mean, your points are all well made, and they're all very well made actually. The point is that, as Nicole was just saying a minute ago, the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard in Iran, isn't prescribed, which I find ludicrous. And actually, if you're glorifying terror, you should be allowed to be. You should be arrested.
Well, you're absolutely right. We've talked about this before, and I've said about the IRCG and all the charities that funnel money back towards them.
Well, you should read the report from Lord Walney, actually, John Woodcock, because that was out today, out in the last few days, and it's a really, really good piece of research about this and some good recommendations in there. We have them on the programme every now and again. For the meantime, Chris, thank you for that. Chris and Epsom there with some common sense on all of that. So what do you think about all of this? What are your thoughts? 0344 499 1000. We're trying to pin down that reporter in Michigan. Obviously, it's a very busy, very chaotic chaotic time, and as soon as he comes back to us, we will get him on the screen and make sure we get an update about what's happening in Michigan. For the meantime, we're going to go to the debate desk here in the studio, and our panellists tonight are Shimmy and Lee, who's a policy analyst at the Taxpayers Alliance, and Sebastian Salek, who's a Labour councillor and commentator. Loads to discuss, not just Iran, but also Starmer and what is going on with him and Peter Mandelson. Also, asylum seekers jailed for using migrant hotel rooms to run a county-lined drug network, and the GPs who have said they've never refused a sick note over mental health concerns. Not one. There are some who said they have after one or two, but not very many are ever actually refused on mental health grounds. And there's so many people, more of course, off work, and the taxpayer and businesses paying for this. Obviously, we want to be sympathetic to people who have mental health conditions. I'm one of them. I've had a few days off because of my mental health over the years. But overall, you know, that was for good reason, because I couldn't work. But overall, it's better for people to be in work and to gain the support of their colleagues around them, and to go forward with that. There are people who have mental health conditions who should be off work, but there are many people using it as an excuse, and that is a slap in the face for all of us. So much to discuss here on the debate desk on Talk in a minute.
Welcome to Down the Local, the show that goes from pub to pub across the country, speaking to the punters about the subjects driving us all nuts at the moment.
That's Rachel Reeves, Rachel Thieves, Rachel McCounts.
I don't really know Meghan Markle. I know Meghan Markle from Suits, that's about it.
I don't know about anyone else, and I don't know where this is going. I have 0% beers, and I feel
raising the flag, I think, is symptomatic of this desperation.
Is public transport good value for money?
No, it isn't.
You really don't like speaking to people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who's been in touch, including Sophie, who has pointed out, I've just heard Peter Mandelson. I'm not Peter Mandelson. I've just heard Peter Cardwell say there is some Mandelson news embargoed until 8 o'clock. There will be a development that is embargoed until 8, and we will bring that to you. As soon as that embargo is lifted, after the 8 o'clock news, we will bring that to you. Reasonably major development in the Mandelson story. I'll tell you exactly what that is when I'm allowed to. I'm not at the moment, but in 34 minutes I will be allowed to. We will talk more about Mandelson on the debate desk as well, and whatever you want to say, however you want to say it, do get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call, and indeed you can talk to me and these chaps too. Simeon Lee is policy analyst at the Taxpayers Alliance. Good evening to you.
Thank you for having me.
And Sebastian Salek is a Labour councillor and commentator. Great to have you in the studio.
Good to see you.
They're both on the debate desk. Great to have them. I promise you we will have some women at some stage. We did ask a number of them today. We've had 4 nights and it's all been men. But we will get some on hopefully tomorrow night. But a couple of people haven't been available in some of the evenings. But the A-list are here, Sebastian and Simeon. Great to see you. Let's talk about Iran and the new supreme leader. He's warning the US to close its Gulf bases immediately or face further attacks. There's an interesting aspect because British troops have been attacked by Iranian drones as well, and almost whether we like it or not, it seems that British troops and our brave servicemen and women are being sort of involved in this in some way. Sebastian, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly very concerning. What really worries me the most is that there seems to be no plan here. I think Trump hoped it was going to be another Venezuela. He could go in, clean sweep, move on, which domestically would serve him well and internationally would serve us all well. And it doesn't seem to have played out. So we're into uncharted territory. And I think we have to be very, very careful now about what we commit to as a country. Because
what should we actually commit to? Because we've been told it's defensive positions. Starmer either took his time or dithered, depending on which way you want to look at it, about our bases being used. But if there have been attacks, as we know there have been in Cyprus, and there's a clear human rights element to this as well, what do you think we should do if you were advising Starmer?
Yeah, I mean, I would take this day by day. And look, if there are attacks against UK troops, wherever they be, whether that is in Iraq, as it was today, or in Cyprus, as it has been in previous days, you need to respond to that. You need to treat that very, very seriously. But giving a blank check to the US, as we have done in the past, and it's ended very badly, I think would not be the way to go on this one.
Simeon, what's your view on this?
Well, I think there's one issue of whether or not we want to sort of take action, but there's also the question of whether we can actually take action. I mean, what this episode has really demonstrated is how unprepared this country is for this sort of military situation. I mean, I think I saw quite a startling sort of fact that there's no missile defence over, the United Kingdom. Now, it's quite far away from...
But that's been the case for a long time, certainly when it comes to drones and missiles as well. And there have been people calling for that for, 20 years, and that hasn't happened. And then we've got, I'm not blaming Labour for this per se, because obviously it's happened over a long period of time, but Labour, being told £28 billion in a defence black hole a couple of months ago.
I mean, you're absolutely right. I think that out of the entire Royal Navy, there are only 5, operational ships, and that's a really shocking sort of statistic. And I think that it's not just this government. I think under both Labour and Conservative governments, there has been, a continued lack of investment in the military. A lot of this funding has been taken away from essential capabilities like our military and put into the ever-growing welfare state.
So is this the wake-up call we need on defence, Sebastian?
It may well be. And look, you can understand why governments of both colours have been more relaxed about defence than perhaps they should have been.
And the Liberal Democrats, don't let them off there.
They've all been there. They've all been there. And look, we've lived through a period of relative peace, and we've lived through a period of austerity. So money was tight and the need wasn't as urgent as it might have been. I think as well as spending more on defence, it's about who we ally ourselves with, and our yoking ourselves to the US is really concerning, both in terms of our political alignment, but also in terms of the might and the hold that they have over us as a result. So I'd like to see a realignment, both within NATO and within our European partners, to be able to look after ourselves. And that takes us, of course, also to energy and our own energy dependence. And when Labour talks about Great British Energy, that's what this is about. It's making sure that we can survive shocks like this, which we've seen with Russia and now we're seeing with Iran.
Are we in any position to survive those energy shocks, or will we be with Great British Energy? I mean, it's almost a bit of a joke, that company.
Well, I think you're quite right that this Labour government hasn't really showed how it's going to achieve any of these things. It talks a very big agenda, but I think when it comes to the actual reality of it, we've seen over the last 1 year, the record has not been that great. Just on the military, it really clearly shows that how a weakness in this area of military actually translates into economic costs, because a lot of this economic disruption that's being caused right now will affect energy prices. It will affect inflation.
And confidence is part of that, isn't it, economically?
Absolutely. Yeah. That is a really big issue for taxpayers in this country.
I just want to have a quick look. I'll come back to you in a second, Sebastian, but I just want to have a quick look at what Donald Trump has been saying. He has been characteristically confident about Iran and where things are with it. So let's have a look at that now.
Well, it's only good if you win. You can only do. And we've won. Let me say, we've won. You never like to say too early you won. We won. We won the bet. In the first hour, it was over.
In the first hour, it was over. Is that a fair thing to say, Sebastian?
No. I mean, this is a man who has no clear plan, but he also has no clear rationale. The Atlantic did a very good piece where they traced his reasoning over the days, and every day it's something different. And from
the thing I worry about, I really want regime change in Iran. If there is to be this action, and there are people in Iran who are crying out for it and say they want it to happen, there are others who think it's a dreadful thing. And that's sort of the same around the world. At least let's get regime change and at least get some human rights protections in there. But that doesn't seem to be, that was at one stage the objective, doesn't seem to be anymore, and that really concerns me, Sebastian.
Yes, and this is also a man who is 2 years away from not being the president anymore. He can't stand again. He's very much in last term territory, and this is a man who wants a legacy. I don't think he's particularly bought into the Republican project. That was a vehicle for him to become president. So
but they bought into him.
Well, they bought into him, and he's not particularly worried about what he leaves behind for the Republicans. So I think he's going to go out in flames and do what it takes to get himself something, whether that's a Nobel Peace Prize or another accolade. That's what really, really concerns me.
Sherman?
I think we really have to take a look at how any of these objectives are going to be achieved on the ground, because it's all very well and good to have, airstrikes, but I think it's very unlikely that airstrikes themselves are going to lead to regime change. We've seen these airstrikes happen in Libya. We've seen it happen in Yemen. It hasn't really led to the outcomes that we want, and I'm not sure whether or not the US president or any of the other countries, frankly, are ready to actually put in that kind of boots on the ground kind of involvement.
No, I totally agree with you. I don't think that's even on the cards. And interestingly, if you look at Syria, for example, the regime change came almost despite what happened internationally, although the full story of that, I'm sure, will take a long time to be told. In just a minute, we're going to talk about matters domestic. Peter Mandelson, and the Prime Minister has been in part of the UK he's only been to once before as Prime Minister, which is Northern Ireland. He's been talking about Peter Mandelson. He's been talking about his own responsibility for what has happened there. A very brutal round of interviews for one of his key lieutenants, Nick Thomas Simmons, this morning. We'll talk about what Shemaine and Sebastian think about that, and let's hear what you think too. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much for everybody who has got in touch. We'll come to more of your calls, texts, tweets and voice notes in a minute or two, but we're going to talk about Peter Mandelson now. The £75,000 bung for betraying Britain is how it has been called to some degree, and Summers ministers happily handing the peer a huge payoff, according to one newspaper. We know, of course, the Prime Minister said about a month ago at Prime Minister's Questions that he knew about Peter Mandelson's staying friends with Jeffrey Epstein even after, or even before, he appointed him. But that process, what actually happened, did it happen correctly? Peter Mandelson has been lying low, of course. He's been arrested, he was released on bail and is now just under investigation, so no bail any longer. He hasn't been charged, but still the questions come for the Prime Minister after the release of this 147-page dossier. Prime Minister in Northern Ireland today talking about this is what he said.
Let me start where I must start, which is to accept, as I do, that I made a mistake in appointing Peter Mandelson. And let me follow that up swiftly, as I've done before, but I need to do it again, with an apology to the victims of Epstein for appointing Peter Mandelson. It was my mistake, and I take responsibility in relation to it. The release of the information shows what was known. That led to further questions being asked. Unfortunately, because of the Metropolitan Police investigation, we can't release that information yet. But that doesn't take away from the fact that it was me that made the mistake, and it's me that makes the apology to the victims of Epstein, and I do that.
Very interesting, he's talking about an apology to the victims of Epstein, but there's nothing really more that he knew now. He perhaps didn't know the extent of the contact, but he certainly knew they were still in contact. In fact, he'd said that to Parliament, so very interesting context. We'll get into the discussion with Simeon and Sebastian in a second, but let's hear first what the Leader of the Opposition, Leader of the Conservatives, Kemi Badenoch, thought about what Starmer had to say.
For so long, the Prime Minister has tried to make this about Peter Mandelson's lies. What this shows is that it is Keir Starmer himself who has lied repeatedly since the very start to the whole country about what he knew, when and how. And these files have exposed the fact that the Prime Minister has not been honest with the country or with the Commons about the extent to which he knew about this relationship.
Shimia, do you feel the Prime Minister has been honest?
Well, I think certainly there are a lot of questions that he has to answer. I mean, he has now apologised, but it's not really clear what he's apologising for, right? His apology doesn't really tell us how we got to this stage, how Peter Mandelson was actually appointed, despite all this information that was out in the public domain about him. I think, you know, this Prime Minister was supposed to be a Director of Public Prosecution, someone who's supposed to be, you know, experienced dealing with criminals and people, you know, who regularly probably lie to the police. It's unimaginable that, you know, Peter Mandelson managed to pull the wool over the eyes of this Prime Minister, despite the amount of information that was out there about him in the public domain at the time.
Sebastian?
I think we have to remember that while the Prime Minister takes responsibility for this error of judgment, he didn't carry out that vetting himself, so we can't expect him to have spotted those lies.
He took the decision based on the vetting, though, Sebastian, and he will have known if he'd even done basic research. I mean, if he knew that he was in touch with Epstein and Dame Karen Pierce, who Mandelson's predecessor, certainly as interim anyway, ambassador to the US, was jumping up and down saying this is going to be a big deal. Surely he should have taken notice of that. It was an error of judgment.
Well, in hindsight, of course it was an error. We can all see that.
You could tell at the time. He was being told at the time this is an error of judgment.
Well, I don't think so.
Well, he was. Karen Pierce said it was an error of judgment at the time.
Yes, one person said it at the time, but the general...
So he's not just someone off the street. This is someone, the interim ambassador.
No, quite right. But if you look at the general tenor in the media at the time, nobody was saying this. It was only after the revelations came out in September when we found out about the birthday book, when we found out about the My Best Pal stuff, all the really awful stuff, and all the stuff that Mandelson ended up being sacked over, that the tide turned, the narrative changed, and all of a sudden it became, you should have known. When in actual fact, what Starmer had access to, as far as we know, and look, if the next data dump gives us anything else, then of course the story moves on. But he knew about having spent the time in the flat in 2008, 2009, which anybody with an internet connection also knew at the time.
But surely, I mean, you're the Prime Minister, you sign this off, he's apologised, as Simeon says, I'm not sure what he's actually apologising for, what part of it he's apologising for. Surely, if you know, and it's flagged to you, and Karen Pierce is jumping up and down saying, look, Epstein, you bring in Peter Mandelson, you say, what exactly is your connection now, or was your connection until you know, he died in 2019, up to that point, between the time he was convicted of paedophilia. Of course, Peter Mandelson lied, but then, you know, we know he's a proven liar, and we know this. I mean, Peter Mandelson, of course, doesn't think he's done anything wrong, but demonstrably he has lied on a number of occasions.
Of course he has, but if somebody's lied on a number of occasions, you can't then assume that everything they ever say is a lie. I mean, there are questions now about the vetting process, because clearly it didn't catch what it should have caught.
It's been changed already, and the Cabinet Office have told us that, but surely, I mean, I think this just comes down to judgment at the time. And now it's fine to look back. I know what some people say, and this hindsight is a wonderful thing, and really would we have been in that position, but I just wonder about the view that we have on how he presents himself, really, Keir Starmer, Mr. Rules, Mr. Discipline, Mr. You know, looking at things and detail and process, and none of those things happen in the way it should have, in this case at least.
Yeah, you're quite right, and I think this will cast a shadow over him, because that was very much his brand, wasn't it? And I think this is going to cause some people to question that. And it's just the reality of being the Prime Minister. You're overseeing such a labyrinthine organisation, which is the government. At any moment, 1,000 people are doing 1,000 things, and a vast chunk of them are messing up, and eventually that's going to come out.
Well, that's absolutely true. And I mean, I worked in government for 3.5 years, and I'm aware that that is, of course, the case. But when it's a really big decision, I mean, this isn't just something you sign off. No. This is probably the most important diplomatic post with a very difficult to deal with American administration. I just wonder, Simeon, whether you have confidence in Keir Starmer's judgment.
Well, I mean, it's just mistake after mistake, right? This is someone who, you know, had been sacked 2 times before from government for improper sort of activities. And that you have these civil servants highlighting the reputational risk to the government. And now, so even if we accept that, you know, he didn't know at the time, you know, right now he has made a conscious decision to pay out £75,000 to Peter Mandelson after all that's happened. That cannot be the right decision. I absolutely question his judgment on that fact.
Just on that, and look, I think that payout is really disappointing as well, but what would you have done instead?
Well, I think the guidance, his contract very clearly states that if there's gross misconduct, as I believe there is in this case, he's not entitled to any sort of...
I'd have given him nothing, and if he took you to an employment tribunal, fight it.
But even if that's more expensive, which is very likely to be...
Yes, the principle is more important.
Really?
Yes. The Prime Minister claimed in Parliament Mandelson lied during his vetting. The government privately assessed there was no evidence of misconduct in the role that would give rise to normal disciplinary proceedings. The Foreign Office Permanent Secretary, Ollie Robbins, wrote of the package, "This represents good value for money." Other officials congratulated each other on getting the sum, including £34,000 severance, as well as cash in lieu of notice, as so low. I just think, I mean, that might be low in relative terms. The Chief Secretary of the Treasury at the time, James Murray, responded he was happy to sign the payment off. There seems to be no sense of how this would look, that this would necessarily get out. And £75,000 is far more money than many, vast majority of people in this country earn in a year. And there just seemed to be no sense of how this would look or how this would feel. And I'm not saying I'm Mother Teresa, but I know when I spent public money, I tried to think at all times, if a taxpayer approached me in the street and said, do you have to take this flight? Do you have to pay for this taxi? Do you have to do this, that and the other? That I would be able to look at them in the eye. And there just doesn't seem to be that kind of thought in this process. Is that fair?
Quite right. I think it's a tricky one, and it's an edge case. That's why, because these kinds of positions usually go to civil servants, and civil servants usually don't disgrace themselves and have to be sacked. And it's just a quirk of the system that this time it was a politician, and that politician brought shame upon himself and upon his party and upon his country and many others, and had to be sacked. And as you say, there was no evidence of gross misconduct in the job, which is just the technicality that meant he could come after them and ask for all that money. I think it's really gross that he did push that, and I really hope that he's going to give the money that he has been awarded to a victim's charity.
He'll do Hugh Edwards and not give it back, and no contrition from Peter Mandelson either.
Look, if the Prime Minister can't stand up to, you know, Peter Mandelson, you know, what hope does he have of standing up to, you know, the enemies of this country? So I think it's absolutely essential as a point of principle for the Prime Minister to actually have said no, drawn a line in the sand and said, you know, you're not getting this money, regardless.
But then you get sued to high heaven and you end up spending more taxpayers' money. I understand that it's admirable, but it's also much more expensive for the taxpayer.
Well, I think there's a point to be made here that you cannot just shake down, essentially, this government for money by threatening to embarrass the government through legal proceedings. I think it's very clear guidance in the civil service sort of handbook that you cannot be paying out these severance packages in order to avoid embarrassing legal challenges.
Yeah,
and I think that's very much
exactly right. That's not supposed to happen. Sue has been in touch and says, ordinary Joe Bloggs knew Mandelson was a loose cannon. Joanna in Salisbury has been in touch too to say Labour was told a £28 billion black hole in defence. We should have filed it with this net zero budget. There's no point in being eco if we aren't able to protect ourselves. Carbon capture alone, $20 billion. They need to wake up and smell the coffee. Amanda in London says, good evening, Peter. I find it astonishing how Keir Starmer's government community, some of whom just harm, before the loyal, patriotic British Jews who have never caused any trouble. A sign of cowardice by Starmer, I feel, says Amanda in London. Well, plenty of patriotic Muslims as well, but there are major problems with Islamism, as we know, and we'll continue to talk about. Lots more to discuss if you want to talk to me, and indeed, maybe even the panel as well. 0344 499 1000. In a second, we're going to talk about other issues, not just Peter Mandelson, but also asylum seekers who have been jailed for using a migrant hotel room to run a county lines drug network, and the GPs who will not refuse a sick note on mental health grounds. So much more to discuss. I want you to discuss it with us. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Welcome to Down the Local, the show that goes from pub to pub across the country, speaking to the punters about the subjects driving us all nuts at the moment.
That's Rachel Reeves, Rachel Feeds, Rachel McCounts.
I don't really know Meghan Markle. I know Meghan Markle's from Suits. That's about it.
I don't know about anyone else, and I don't know where this is going. I have 0% beers, and I feel
Raising the flag, I think, is symptomatic of its desperation.
Is public transport good value for money?
No, it isn't.
You really don't like speaking to people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to Pete in Southend-on-Sea, who says Mandelson got twice his entitlement in order to stop him disclosing something. What was it? Well, we don't know that necessarily, but I would certainly love to interview Lord Mandelson. He'd be sort of top of my list at the moment, but I would imagine he won't be doing any media for some time to come. Have interviewed him before. Philip is in South Wales and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Philip, thanks for the call. You're on not just with me, but with our debate desk panellists, Simeon and Sebastian. So what would you like to say, Philip?
Yeah, good evening, Peter.
Good evening.
Yes, Starmer knew every little detail about Mandelson.
Did he?
He knew everything. Yeah, he knew everything. Everything. So why was Mandelson given an interview in the first place for the ambassador's job?
The problem I see in all the problem I see in all of this, Philip, is he was vetted. The vetting process clearly doesn't work. But you've got, MI5 looking into his background. They present a bit of evidence that isn't adequate, and then you have a Prime Minister signing it off. It doesn't seem to work.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, but he shouldn't have been given an interview in the first place. None of this would have happened. The other thing I'd like to say, where are the cabinet and the backbenchers? They are so stupid. Starmer now is the most hated person in the country, the biggest liar, and I can't wait for the next general election because the Labour Party are going to be massacred. And can you imagine when they come to these TV interview debates and all that? Mm-hmm. They're going to be humiliated.
Well, we'll see. Philip, just stay where we are just for a second. I'll get the views of Sebastian and Simeon on what you've said there, and then I'll come back to you, I promise. I mean, on that point of Labour's weakness, Simeon, and the fact that we see in poll after poll after poll, not just them coming second, but actually third, even to Reform and to the Green Party as well. There's a big problem for Keir Starmer here. He is a liability.
I think you're right in the sense that this is a government that came into, this is a party that came into power with a huge majority, a massive majority in parliamentary terms, and it really hasn't translated into being able to deliver any of its agenda. I mean, even its own welfare reforms were defeated by its own backbenchers, and they had to do a U-turn, and it's been U-turn after U-turn after U-turn. It's a prime minister that can't stand up to his own party, and I think at the minimum, in order to govern the country, you need to be able to stand up to your own party.
Well, let's ask one of their councillors, Sebastian. Is it time to dump Starmer? Has he become a liability?
No, I don't think so. Look, he's made a lot of mistakes, but he's also started a project that I think is going to bear fruit. And it's a bit of a weird comparison, but I think a lot about Crossrail, which took ages, and it was over time, and everyone moaned about it, and it was so expensive. And then the second it got built, everybody loved it. And that's what these big projects take. They take a bit of time and a bit of energy, and they come to eventually. Maybe
a bat tunnel here, a bat tunnel there.
Exactly.
The problem, though, I suppose, is that for every Crossrail, which admittedly has been a success, there's an HS2. Philip, what do you think about what you've heard from Sebastian and Simeon there?
Well, I got to be honest with you, Sebastian will defend Starmer to the hilt. Whatever Starmer
He's allowed to. He's allowed to, Philip.
Yeah, well, but he's not saying the truth.
I just said I thought he made a lot of mistakes.
He's not saying the truth. Yeah, well, all the U-turns, he's an absolute disaster for the country. Okay. And let me tell you something now. Let me just tell you something. I've voted Labour for 50 years. And now they are an absolute disaster.
What do you think will happen, Philip? What do you think will happen in South Wales? Do you think Labour will lose the Welsh Assembly? Do you think Reform or Plaid Cymru will become the government there?
Yeah. Labour are going to be wiped out.
Okay.
Labour are going to be wiped out, and it's going to be Nigel Farage and Plaid Cymru.
It'll be very interesting to see what happens. Okay.
Yeah, finally, Peter.
Go for it.
It's going to be at least when the next general election comes, Labour are going to be wiped out as well, and it's going to take at least 30 years for them to get back into power. Thank you very much.
Philip, thanks for your points. Really appreciate them. If you want to get on the air like Philip, 0344 499 1000. I think we'll leave Labour just for the meantime because there's a couple of other things I want to talk about with Jimmy and Sebastian on the debate desk. The asylum seeker who was jailed for using a migrant hotel room to run County Line's drug network. Absolutely dreadful story. Jimmy, give us some of the detail of this and what you think about it.
Well, I think that sort of incident really highlights the complete lack of control that we have over people entering this country, right? And the result of this lack of control will be, even more cost for taxpayers. So in this case, they were sentenced to, many years in jail. And of course, it costs £50,000 a year to house someone in prison. At a time when we're already having a prison shortage, that is just going to add to the cost. And of course, when they're finally released, I'm sure they're going to appeal, and there's going to be all sorts of a long and drawn-out legal process. And of course, these are people who are, in this case, a violent criminal, a drug dealer in many cases.
Well, it's also the fact that they are running county lines, and we know who are the ones who run county lines. They're vulnerable young people, often in the care system, and these are two asylum seekers who've been jailed for running this county lines network from their taxpayer-funded hotel room, Mohammed Dawood and Al Saeed Abdul Khalik, using the notorious Roundhouse Hotel in Bournemouth as a base for their illegal empire. County lines, really, really huge problem, as we know. They've now been jailed for 37 months and 44 months respectively. But another dreadful indictment of the asylum system, Sebastian.
Well, what these guys did was awful, and look, I represent a ward in a borough that's been blighted by county lines in the past. We sit on the edge of London. It's a very obvious place to be operating if you're trying to peddle drugs from central London out into the counties. I don't think this tells us much more than that, though. I would hope that they'll be dealt with appropriately. They've gone to prison. The Home Secretary has made it easier for people like this to be deported, and I think if you come here and seek asylum and then abuse that system in the way that they have abused that system by committing horrible crimes, you should be punished for that.
Let's talk about the hundreds of GPs who have said they never refused a fit note for mental health concerns. This is hundreds of GPs have told, there's some BBC research, that they've never refused to sign a patient off for work for mental health issues. 752 GPs replied. 540 said they never refused such a request. 162 said they had turned at least one down, and a smaller number, 50, said they would prefer not to say. I'm someone who's had mental health issues. I've talked about it. It's no secret. Certainly, if people need to be off work, they need to be off work. But the point I would argue is actually being in work for many people with depression and anxiety actually helps them. It certainly helps me. I'm not an expert. But if you're not turning people away and saying actually there needs to be a proper assessment of your mental health before we give you this sick line, well, that's a big problem in itself, isn't it, Shimian?
Well, you're right, and that I think we're putting doctors into a really impossible position here, right? Because things like mental health, it's very hard. There aren't any physical manifestations of it, right? So a lot of that relies on people acting in good faith, and unfortunately, in this country, the benefit system is set up that being on benefits can be a lot more profitable than people actually working, and people actually take advantage of the system, and so there's a lot more of this sort of incentive in order to sort of play up these conditions, and these doctors are being put in a really impossible position, because if they sort of dispute that you have this condition, that is going to open a whole new can of worms. In some cases, I think that doctors reported patients getting aggressive even when they refuse to sign off these sick notes.
The point is as well that if you speak to any GP, and I have a couple of friends who are GPs, they will say that on a Monday morning they have 200 people who want to see them. They have their surgery maybe has 100 places that day, and so many of those appointments will be simply to sign people off on the sick for whatever reason, whether it's mental health or whether it's physical health, and the appointments can be avoided simply by doing the paperwork. That's a problem, isn't it, on lots of levels, Sebastian?
On lots of levels. I mean, look, I think broadly the move to seeing people remotely has had its positives. You can see people very quickly and you can triage them very quickly without them having to give up their time to come in and without you having to go through the process of seeing them as the doctor. Of course, that creates its problems because there's some issues that you have to go and see in person. So there is room for improvement there. But broadly on this issue, I think we have to start by acknowledging that this is a reality, and I'm pleased that you did, and thank you for sharing your experiences as well, because there are far too many people still who think that mental health or poor mental health is made up. And if we can't get past that, we're not going to get anywhere near something.
But the problem is some people do make it up. Some people do blame their mental health, or alternatively, what I find, and I find a bit offensive to be honest, is when people say my mental health is poor when they mean I'm having a bad day or I'm having a rough time. And I remember sitting beside a GP at a dinner once in Plymouth who said, I think it was Plymouth or Portsmouth, Plymouth, where she said, look, there's a university in this town, and every April, May, I get loads of students saying, can I have anti-anxiety medication? She says no, because there are exams, you will feel anxious, that is a reasonable thing. I just worry that we're over-medicating this sometimes, Shimmy, and I wonder what you think.
I think you're right. I think some of the latest statistics show that about a quarter of the entire population report that they have a disability. A lot of that will be driven by increasing mental health issues amongst young people. And of course, certainly there are legitimate mental health issues, but I don't think that a quarter of the population has that sort of disability. I think that's clearly a sort of diagnosis system that has somewhat gone out of control, and of course that will have impact on the public finances, right? Part of the reason why we've had this black hole is because of this massively ballooning benefits bill, disability benefits bill, which has grown by something like a third in the last 5 years and is forecast to grow another third. That is something that's unsustainable. So I think we have to really drill down to what we think qualifies as a disability and how much support the government is ready to offer and how much it can afford to offer to people who have disabilities.
Thank you both very much. That is Sebastian Salak, who's a Labour councillor and commentator, and Shimmy Lee from the Taxpayers Alliance, who's a policy analyst there. So thank you for their analysis this evening. Much appreciated. Amanda says, I'm convinced Starmer appointed Mandelson as US ambassador thinking he would have some kind of influence over Trump because of the Epstein case, says Amanda. And Julia in Staffordshire says, I've just been in Tesco in Longton in Stoke-on-Trent and heard an announcement wishing customers an Eid Mubarak. Why? The supposed inclusion is having the opposite effect and contributing to the division in the UK at the moment. Read the room, Tesco, says Julia in Staffordshire. Well, hopefully they'll wish you a happy Easter in a few weeks' time. Did they mention anything about Lent? I've been off Diet Coke for 22 days. There are another 22 days to go, and believe me, it is not fun. We'll take some more calls, text, tweets and voice notes. We'll also bring you that story, which will break in the next few minutes, a development in the Mandelson case. I'll bring that to you after the news, so stay with us here on Talk. There's so much more to discuss between now and 10 o'clock.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good evening. It's just gone 8 o'clock, and thank you so much for your company. There's so much to discuss between now and 10 o'clock. Some breaking news, and that the Conservatives are demanding an investigation into the Mandelson files cover-up. They want Sir Laurie Magnus, the independent ethics advisor, to do a full investigation, the independent advisor on ministerial standards. And there is a letter that has just been released from Alex Burkhardt, who is a senior shadow cabinet figure on that. We'll get into that in a second. Also on the Iran-US war, we'll talk about that, and also what's been happening in Michigan. The gunman who is now dead after using his car to crash into a Jewish temple in Michigan. We'll talk about the Home Office refusing to reveal how many asylum seeker families have accepted the £40,000 bribe in your money, taxpayers' money, to leave Britain. And the BBC boss says the broadcaster has no right to exist unless it has proven its value. We'll talk about all of those things. Also, a bizarre story where an air ambulance charity, its chief executive, is coming on a little bit later on to tell us about how they tried to do an awareness campaign to show people how to do CPR. They had a mannequin with a woman's body and a mannequin of a woman which had bare breasts on it. Well, that was taken off Facebook because it was seen as obscene. Well, of course it isn't. It's a perfectly reasonable thing. It's just female anatomy, and it's also very, very useful for people to know what CPR is and how important it is. So we'll talk to them a little bit later on. So then, lots to discuss in all of this. I want to discuss it with you. 0344 499 1000. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note, less than a minute, please. And you can send that to the main number. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message to the main number, or give me a ring on the main number, which is 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss between now and 10 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. Ernie's been in touch and says, my granddaughter has mental health problems but has been given medication from the doctor. Works wonderfully. It allows her to hold down a full-time job and lead a pretty normal life. The medication works, so why do people have to give up work, says Ernie. I suppose it depends on the condition, but as I've said before, you know, I'm on medication, taking medication every single day for depression and anxiety, and coming into work helps me. Talking to you on the phone helps me. Being with my brilliant colleagues and sparking off them and hearing interesting ideas and talking about stories. To be honest, talking about the office gossip as well from time to time, not that I would ever be involved in any of that, of course, is great. It's really good. It helps my mental health. 0344 499 1000 if you have your own story on that. Thank you to Mary in County Down, who says Sebastian is wrong about Starmer. He's not making mistakes. He's making policy decisions that are destroying this country, and he's doing so deliberately. He honestly believes what he's doing is the best for Britain, and that's why he and his Labour acolytes are so dangerous. Characterising Starmer's actions as mistakes just makes him sound a bit hapless. This is the project that people were stupid enough to vote for, says Mary in County Down. So much to discuss. I also want to bring you the latest on this breaking story about the Conservatives demanding an investigation into the Mandelson files cover-up. This is Alex Burkhardt, who's a senior shadow cabinet minister, and he wants, obviously the Conservatives want all files related to Peter Mandelson. Some of them are out, some of them are not, but there are what the Conservatives call serious deficiencies in the released material, raising concerns that key details are being withheld from Parliament, and the humble address, basically the mechanism by which the files were released, is not being complied with. Now Alex Burkhardt, who's the Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, has asked Sir Laurie Magnus, who's the independent advisor on ministerial standards, to investigate the Prime Minister over this, as well as his misleading statements, as the Conservatives say, to Parliament regarding Mandelson's appointment for a possible breach of the ministerial code. And we've got the letter there. It's long and detailed. I'm not going to read out the whole thing, but certainly some of the headings are about the Prime Minister's statement to the House, the Prime Minister being warned about the Epstein connection before the appointment, the process not being full in the Conservatives' estimation, described internally as weirdly rushed. We know that is the case. The Prime Minister, the Conservatives say, blame Mandelson's deceit, where the due diligence documents show he was aware of the red flags. They've detailed what they think are possible breaches of the ministerial code and non-compliance with the legal and constitutional status of what they have asked. So it's a very long letter. I'm not going to read out the whole thing. certainly, but Alex Burkhardt for the Conservatives has put that in the public domain, and the embargo has just been lifted on that. We'll talk more about that a little bit later on. The political editor of the Huffington Post will be with us to talk about that and everything else political today. I want to talk as well about what's happened in Michigan. We're still trying to get a reporter on from there who has spoken to us previously about what happened. Let's just bring ourselves up to date with the fact that the attacker is dead, and hopefully just reasonably minor injuries to the security guard who was trying to fend off the attacker at the synagogue in Michigan. The sheriff has given an update in the last hour and a half or so. Let's just see what he has been saying.
Okay, so again, this is all going to be super preliminary stuff. And anytime you have a situation like this, information changes and evolves. Here's what we know so far. A car came to the facility, breached the facility by driving into it, was engaged by security. We believe there is one individual deceased in the vehicle. It's been complicated because there was some fire, to say the least, with that vehicle. We believe that individual is deceased. No kids, this is the important thing, no kids or no staff was injured whatsoever, okay? So we have no victims other than one of the lead security people was hit by the car and was taken to the hospital for treatment. That individual should be okay. So far, that's our information to this point.
Well, that is the local sheriff talking there. A big shock for the United States. We go there to Michael Yaki, the political analyst, former senior advisor to Nancy Pelosi. Michael, a country in shock, of course, with what happened in Michigan, and it shows the huge levels of anti-Semitism that are there. I know that many people will be very worried about this. It does seem to be over, though, Michael.
Well, I mean, at least for this incident, it's over, but as you know, I was on 17 years. I was on the U.S. Commission for Civil Rights, and anti-Semitism was something that we addressed all the time, and it's something that keeps on rearing its ugly head. And because of what's happening right now in the Middle East, it's becoming even more so from many different sides. So I think that the issue here is one where synagogues having to hire private security is almost the name of the game right now.
Yeah, it's happening. It happens to the vast majority of them, if not all of them, in this country too, Michael. It is a serious problem.
It is, and it shouldn't be tolerated, but it must be combated. And it's from public education. It's from the leadership of our politicians and from people like you to get out there and let people understand. You know, this is not okay. But you know, you can't sometimes just talk away prejudice, and it's something that starts very young, and we have to make sure that we're educating people and letting them understand that this is not something that can be tolerated in today's society.
Let's talk about the Iran war and what President Trump has been saying about that. This was he was in Kentucky last night, and he said something pretty bold about this. I wonder what you think about this statement, Michael.
Well, it's only good if you win. You know, you can only do. And we've won. Let me tell you, we've won. You know, you never like to say too early you won. We won. We won the bet. In the first hour, it was over.
In the first hour, it was over. The war has been won. Michael, what do you make of that? It's typical Trump bravado, but it doesn't strike me as being particularly true.
Well, I mean, you know, we all remember, well, at least some of us can remember the fact how much grief George Bush took for saying mission accomplished in Iraq, and how the war dragged on at the cost of American and British lives. Here we have a situation where the president is actually saying, not just mission accomplished, that we won in the first hour, and yet the Straits of Hormuz are blocked. The price of oil is going over $100 a barrel. The International Energy Agency has had to release the largest amount of reserves it ever has had to do because of the Straits of Hormuz. Our bases are being bombed and are continuing to be bombed by missiles and by drones. So I don't think it's over by any stretch of the imagination. And I think that not just the American people, I think that all people who are watching what's going on in the Middle East understand it's not over, not by a long shot.
Certainly, and we have some more detail. Well, it's rumour really, but there's clearly been some sort of injury to the new Supreme Leader, the son of the old one, Khamenei Jr., who is apparently in a coma, having lost a leg after being seriously injured in airstrikes, yet the bile continues to come out from the regime. I just wonder, from your estimation, what Trump's plan is here, because so many people don't seem to know, and there's been a lot of reporting of various people in the Department of Defense, Department of War, as it's now called, the Pentagon, where on the White House, where so many Republicans and members of the administration won't say it out loud, but they are wondering why they're there and what the game plan is.
I think a vast majority of the American people are wondering why we're there and what is this game plan. It is not over. Not when you've seen the price of gasoline at your local pump go up by, in the United States, like almost $1 in a week. I mean, this is a situation where you have to ask yourself, who knows what's actually going on in Iraq right now? Apparently, we had bad intelligence that led us to fire that missile that struck that girls' school in Tehran. And if we don't know who's actually in charge, I think that's actually the most dangerous game that we're playing right now. If it's just individual Revolutionary Guard Corps commanders or captains or colonels firing off missiles and deciding what they're going to be doing, it's not something that you and I or anyone in the defense establishment can predict what will happen next. And in a war, unpredictability and not being able to understand how you can bring something to a close is a terrible place to be. And that's, I think, where we are, if not already, where we're headed, if not already there.
I wonder what you think the economic implications of the Strait of Hormuz being closed are, especially for America, because of course your country produces a lot of oil but is still dependent on foreign oil. Also, China, of course, is very much, well, not quite dependent, but certainly up to 15 to 20% of their oil comes from Iran. So really this could be very difficult for those two superpowers, couldn't it?
I mean, this is almost an own goal by President Trump with regard to what his overall strategy should be or is in the entire world. Right now, the only person benefiting from this is Vladimir Putin. His oil becomes a lot more valuable. Apparently, he's making more than $150 million more a day because of what's going on right now. The fact is that this has a knock-on effect on all the Western economies, all the world economies. Certainly China, which depends a lot on this oil, is going to have a great impact. And that, of course, will have impacts down the consumer chain, right, because of all the products made in China and exported. Everything comes along. So I don't exactly think that, you don't want to say this about your own country, but I don't believe that we've really thought this out the way we should. We didn't game it out. We didn't understand where the escalations could occur, or at least we didn't choose to decide or game out where the escalations could occur. Because at least I would say, and I think you are a very intelligent man, Peter. I think
many would dispute that, Michael.
I think both of us could have gamed out that the Straits of Hormuz were going to be a bargaining chip no matter what happened. And the fact that this seems to have come as a surprise, that ships are being hit by missiles or drones right now, that they're on fire, that we had to go after their minesweepers rather than take them out, say, on day one. I mean, these are the kinds of things that you just have to ask yourself, what is going on? What are we doing? Do we know what we're doing? And no, the war is not over. Not, as I said, not by a long shot.
Michael, thank you. That's Michael Yaki, the US political analyst, former senior advisor to Nancy Pelosi. Thank you to Michael, who says if crowds of people stand on the public highways or pavements demonstrating, blocking free passage, they used to be arrested for obstruction and charged. That's referring to the Al-Quds March. And another person says the pathetic elite have decided to replace Winston Churchill on our banknotes. It should be more appropriate to replace Starmer with a Birmingham rat, says this person. I'm not quite sure what well, obviously there are many rats in Birmingham because of the bin train strikes there. We did discuss that yesterday, but if you have further views on the banknote controversy or who should be on the banknotes, I saw a very good AI one today which had Larry the cat on the banknotes, which I would support, but I think I'd support Churchill more, even though I do love cats. Brian is in Hertfordshire and has some thoughts on Mandelson. Brian, thanks for the call. You've given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. What would you like to say this evening?
Yeah, I'd just like to say this, paying the $75,000 to Peter Mandelson is probably a bargain, given the legal costs that could ensue. But
it sticks in the craw, doesn't it?
I know,
that we've had to do it.
What I wanted to say was there are cases on record, and Mr. Google is your friend here, of people being sacked, and I think one or two have gone to prison for gaining employment by deception, which I think is gaining peculiar.
Well, I think they should have gone to employment tribunal. I really do. Are you Peter Mandelson, honestly going to take them to an employment tribunal, given the disgrace that happened, given his sacking? I mean, he said he wanted 500 grand. I wouldn't have given him 500p.
I wanted to actually see a letter from Keir Starmer to Mandelson saying, "Dear Peter, you lied to me. When I found out you lied to me, I sacked you.
Yeah.
You're sincerely Keir," something like that, along those lines.
Or alternatively, we've spoken to the lawyers about this. They recommend that we make a payment of £75,000 to make this go away. Which rape victims charity, which women's aid shelter, which charity to deal with paedophilia would you like this money to go to? And we'll arrange that in the next 24 hours. That's what I would have said.
Yeah. That could have worked as well, yeah. But I do think that getting a job through dishonesty is normally a
dismissal of offence. Yeah,
you get nothing. And so I'm sure Mr. Google would confirm that.
That's absolutely right. I mean, if you say you got an A in GCSE maths and they can prove you got a B in GCSE maths, you have lied to your employer. So on your CV, on your application, whatever it is, and they can dismiss you. That's very, very well known, Brian. And it seems that there's one rule for. Sorry?
There's an NHS case. There's an NHS case where someone had a senior job in the NHS for quite a few years before they were discovered to have been fraudulent about their qualifications, and I'm pretty sure they went to prison. I'm not sure.
Certainly, it would be very, very important if you're doing a job like operating on people, not if you're doing something much less important like, I don't know, hosting a talk show. Brian, on the Mandelson story itself, I just wonder where you think Starmer goes now in all of this.
Well, I think he's playing quite a clever game, really, by holding his hand up, and not just once, but repeatedly saying it was my mistake, I made it. People do like honesty, they do, and he's being honest there. He did drop an awful clanger.
It's a bit more than that, even, I would argue. But listen, Brian, really good to talk to you. Thanks for the call from Hertfordshire. And if you want to get on the air like Brian between now and 10 o'clock, loads to discuss, whether it's Peter Mandelson, whether it's the war in Iran, or the next story we're going to talk about the Home Office refusing to reveal how many asylum seekers have accepted the £40,000 in taxpayers' money they're offered to leave Britain. Whatever you want to talk about, give me a shout or drop me a voice note, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
So you might remember a little while ago the Home Office said that it would give up to £40,000 to families of illegal asylum seekers, failed asylum seekers who have come over here. They've had their asylum claim which has been looked into, it's been rejected, and then they would be offered up to £10,000 a person, up to 4 people, to go back to where they came from. The Home Office is now refusing to disclose how many failed asylum seekers have snapped up Shabana Mahmood's offer to leave Britain voluntarily. This new pilot scheme was last Thursday, so just a week ago. If you've no right to be in this country, lump sums of £10,000 a head for up to 4 people would be made if they agreed to go. The Home Office told 150 families they're entitled to apply for the cash. They were given a 7-day deadline, which was due to expire at midnight tonight, to accept or lose the offer forever. Well, at 6 o'clock, the Home Office refused to reveal how many families had opted for the cash bonanza, with just a few hours to go before the deadline. Maybe we'll find out tomorrow. Maybe they won't tell us. We're not going to give a running commentary on the offers that have been made, according to the Home Office spokesman. So very, very interesting. That why won't they tell us? Why won't they let us know how many people have taken up this offer and how many failed asylum seekers are going home, and why do we have to bribe them in the first place? Laurie Wastel is associate editor of the Daily Skeptic and joins me now. Laurie, what do you make of this?
I'm very good to be with you, Peter.
Evening,
yes, it's a fascinating story, isn't it, for us to get our teeth into here. I think the question of why won't they reveal this is particularly interesting, because I think what we've got to ask is what actually is a success and what is failure for the Home Office. Obviously, they've offered. It's 150 families and potentially £40,000 each. So that's up to £6 million in taxpayers' money going to these families if it is all taken up. And so, many taxpayers and viewers will be asking, is that actually a good thing? Do we want our money going to these people who have, of course, broken into the country? I mean, it seems to be something that Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, would tout as a success.
Although doesn't it say so much, Laurie, about the fact that we're bribing them with between 10 and 40 grand to do this, rather than simply saying you've got to go, by the way, you're getting on a plane, because then you get into human rights problems, you get into court cases, you get into them being on legal aid and the state paying a lot more. So actually it's probably cheaper, but it shouldn't be. I mean, the principle is totally wrong, but maybe this is actually something that might work, and I just wonder why they won't tell us.
Quite well. I suspect we will find out eventually. I think, the deadline is actually this evening, so it may come out at some point. And I think you may be right that from the fiscal situation as it is, it probably would help for them to go home in this way, even if we have to pay a bit for it. But there are two sort of indirect effects here that we should be thinking about. The first one is the incentives that it sends to others. I mean, if you are aware that even if you completely fail with your asylum application, you will be getting this, then people will be thinking, that actually makes the whole prospect a lot more attractive in the first place. And then we should also be thinking about the asylum system as a whole. Really, if Shabana Mahmood might want to be making some investments in this kind of thing to get this particular problem off her hands. But more broadly, we should be doing what the Americans are doing, which is funding border force, or making it into that kind of maybe an ICE style or something. We have something comparable at least, such that we can deport a lot more people and do it more easily. So at the moment, we're just stuck in these endless legal battles over it, which are ending up being very, very costly.
Well, certainly Reform UK would say that, and that is their policy. It's interesting that a fifth of the UK aid budget is spent on housing migrants in the UK. This is the Independent Commission on Aid Impact said that in 2024, £2.8 billion was spent on hosting migrants and asylum seekers. That's £1 billion more on humanitarian aid, and spending due to fall from 0.5% of UK GDP to 0.3 GDP, what the country makes, of course, with the money diverted to defence, so that money coming down. I mean, many people may argue, I would imagine quite a few viewers and listeners to this programme would say that we need to deal with the problems at home before we deal with the problems abroad. But nonetheless, no matter how you look at it, £2.8 billion spent on hosting migrants and asylum seekers is a huge amount of money.
Absolutely. I think what this, strangely enough, points us to is really the left wing, the humanitarian case for completely abolishing the asylum system. Because the fact is that it's extremely costly, as we've just been talking about, to house these asylum seekers in our country. The key cost is, of course, housing. Whether it's asylum hotels, whether it's HMOs. There's even been a suggestion recently that councils would have to house asylum seekers and others in council housing. This is all, let's remember, using taxpayers' money to bid for types of housing against them to put other people, foreigners, up in an extraordinary situation. That is so much more costly than would be, say, if your goal is to provide the greatest good to the greatest number in some sort of utilitarian way as a humanitarian type, then that money should be being spent abroad in disaster zones like Gaza or Sudan. Perhaps those are the two that have received less aid, perhaps because of this. And instead, the target of our aid is asylum seekers in this country, when a left-wing person really say we should be spending it abroad instead.
Laurie, thank you. That's Laurie Westall there, who is Associate Editor of the Daily Skeptic. A lot of common sense from him. We'll get just a quick view on this from Danny Shaw in a minute, who's a Home Affairs journalist. He's also someone who's worked for the BBC. He was a very well-regarded BBC Home Affairs correspondent. I'll get his view on as well on the outgoing BBC boss Tim Davie, saying the broadcaster has no right to exist unless it proves its value, admitting public trust is in full-on crisis after a string of serious mistakes. I mean, I would argue that what happened with the Donald Trump clip wasn't a mistake. It was a doctoring. It was something that cannot just simply be written off as a mistake. There's lots more to talk about in all of this. We'll also talk about what's happened in Michigan. We'll talk about what the Tories want to happen to Mandelson as well. And the civil servants celebrating the Islamic Revolution at the Iranian embassy. The people we pay for in the Foreign Office doing that, absolutely shameful. They shouldn't have been within a country mile of those celebrations. Lots to discuss on the programme between now and 10 o'clock. However you want to get in contact, 0344 499 1000 is the main number to give me a ring, to send me a WhatsApp text message, or to leave me a voice note. Keep them to less than a minute, please, and we'll play them out. Lots more to discuss. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Right then, let's talk about the BBC, because the outgoing BBC boss, Tim Davie, forgotten but not gone, he's still not gone, says the broadcaster has no right to exist unless it proves its value, and admits the public trust is in full-on crisis after a string of what he calls serious mistakes. It doesn't have an inherent right to exist, he says. I would agree with that. He spoke to a podcast talking about the licence fee, backing the broadcaster's decision to fight for the licence fee model, and talked about what he called a major mistake in regard to the Donald Trump clip. Certainly, I would argue it's a lot more than a mistake. It's a doctoring of that clip. It was a deliberate attempt to change it. It's not just a mistake. A mistake is something that you don't mean to do. So I think there's something in that as well. Also, the licence fee going up, and many people, many of our viewers and listeners, of course, have no faith in the BBC. They tell me that from time to time. I must say, I'm not on the fence on this. I want the BBC to succeed. It's like any large organisation. There is waste. There are lots of people who shouldn't be there. There are lots of broadcasters I think are really good. I think there are things the BBC does very well. I love The Traitors. I love The Apprentice. Some of their news is very good. Some of their analysis is excellent. But I do have many, many problems with it. Danny Shaw is a former BBC Home Affairs correspondent. He's a crime and policing journalist. Just before we get into the BBC, can I just get a quick word from you, Danny, just on this asylum story we were talking about a second ago? I hope you don't mind me asking about this, but I mean, why should the Home Office necessarily, I should say you're a former advisor to the former Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, why should the Home Office necessarily reveal how many failed asylum seeker families have accepted £40,000 in taxpayers' money to leave Britain? But do you think that policy will work?
Look, I think at the margins, Peter, it may make a difference. I mean, there are clearly a number of families who are stubbornly refusing to leave the UK when they've exhausted all their rights to appeal and so on, and the government just cannot get them to go. And I think, you know, it will save the taxpayer money if they can remove some of these families by giving them £10,000 each. It sticks in my craw. It's not comfortable for many of us to think about that. I mean, how many of us would like to be given 10 grand from the, from the Treasury or whatever?
To stop doing something we shouldn't have done in the first place. But you're right, though. It's relative, isn't it?
It's relative. You've got to deal with the practical situation as it is. There is a voluntary removal scheme as it is at the moment. I think the amount that's given is £3,000. It's much better if you're trying to remove people that they go voluntarily. It saves money. It's a lot easier. You know, there's a lot less hassle. You don't have to use force. You don't have to use border guards and all the rest of it to escort people onto flights. Much better to do that.
Yeah.
And if they have some money, then they can at least relocate. Perhaps settle back in their home country or a safe third country potentially. So look, it's not a comfortable thing to be in this situation, but we are where we are.
Yeah.
And I think it will make a difference, but it's not going to have a deterrent effect. I don't believe it will, and I don't believe what I think your previous guest was saying, it's going to act as a pull factor. I do not believe that asylum seekers or migrants heading for northern France are thinking to themselves, I can go to the UK and then I can get £10,000 to come back to where I came from.
And it's also
I just don't think that enters into it.
After the asylum claim has failed as well. So there's a whole process to go through with all of that. Thanks for your views on that. Danny, I know you mainly, or the first time we encountered each other was when I was a special advisor at the Ministry of Justice. You were a Home Affairs correspondent on the BBC. Your job at that stage was to report Home Affairs, including justice issues. You became an advisor to Yvette Cooper. I'm just going to be totally honest here. I hadn't a clue what your politics were. I did not know. It didn't really. I suppose it didn't surprise me necessarily when you became an advisor, but it wasn't like. I mean, there are many journalists I spoke to, and I knew their personal politics who were meant to be impartial, working for the BBC, ITV, whatever. It became really clear what their politics were. I never knew that you were, for that time anyway, a Labour supporter, and that is not something that that was obvious. You were an incredibly impartial journalist who took your job very seriously. I think the Home Affairs unit of the BBC is actually, BBC News is actually really good. I'm a huge fan of June Kelly, who I think is one of the best journalists in Britain. There are parts of the BBC I don't like. There are parts of the BBC that don't work. And I wonder what you think about Tim Davie, the outgoing BBC boss, who says the broadcaster has no right to exist unless it proves its value. He also admits public trust is in full-on crisis. I mean, surely he has a role in that himself in terms of how he has led the organisation.
Well, I listened to Tim Davie's interview and I agree with a lot of it, and I'm very sorry that actually he's leaving as Director General. I was only there for a couple of months when he was DG, but I thought that he's one of the best Directors General that the BBC has had in recent years. And
he's overseen a heck of a lot of crises. I mean, do you think he handled the Hugh Edwards thing well?
I think he probably handled it as well as he could do. A lot of these crises, come on the Director General's desk, when they're already a crisis, and it's how you handle it afterwards.
Well, they kept paying him for months after they knew what was going on.
That was a contractual thing. It was beyond Tim Davie's, remit or power to do anything about that. I think he's now changing the rules around that kind of situation. I mean, I think this reflects more on Hugh Edwards and what he did we should be talking about, rather than taking Tim Davie to task. That look, there were systemic problems with the BBC and how it handled that complaint and those allegations regarding Hugh Edwards and the systems.
But the culture and how that's done, I mean, you say systemic, and I agree with you, there are clearly systemic problems there, but a system is people, and the system is led by a person. I mean, I think I think it was right that he announced he was standing down over the Trump thing. I just want to play a little clip from Jeremy Bowen, the international editor of the BBC, who I do not hold in the same regard as I held Danny Shaw when he was a BBC journalist. Jeremy Bowen, yesterday on the Today programme, this is what he said on Radio 4.
Perhaps analysts and commentators have let their distaste for Donald Trump cloud their judgment. Maybe it doesn't matter that he insults allies whose soldiers fought and died alongside Americans in other Middle Eastern wars, or that sometimes he tells lies.
Can we expect Chris Mason, the BBC political editor, to say Keir Starmer tells lies? Can we expect Katja Adler to say that Ursula von der Leyen tells lies? Can we expect various senior correspondents to go around calling politicians liars? I do wonder, Danny, if that would have happened had it been any other president. Jeremy Bowen, for example, didn't say, for example, Joe Biden is a liar. It does seem that it's open season on Trump and they can say what they like on him. Do you think this is a wise thing for Jeremy Bowen to say?
Well, I listened to that sort of essay from Jeremy Bowen, and I thought it was very well written, calibrated, accurate, and a good analysis. And I thought it was the best of BBC journalism, I have to be honest with you, Peter. And I do hope that if other correspondents at the BBC, political correspondents or the Europe correspondent, was given a similar essay to write about British politicians or European politicians, that they would call out poor behaviour.
Have you ever heard that happen? Have you ever heard that happen?
I think I have heard that kind of thing happen, to be honest.
Have you heard
I think the issue is that
have you heard a political editor call the Prime Minister a liar on TV or on radio? Because I haven't. I've never heard any other. I'm not saying Donald Trump doesn't tell lies. I'm not saying that prime ministers don't tell lies. We sometimes say it on this programme where people come on and call people all sorts of names. The ones we can't broadcast, we do. But this is the international editor of the BBC who's met. I mean, how could he possibly interview Donald Trump after that? I mean, he's probably not going to get an interview with Donald Trump anyway. But if you are Sarah Smith sitting there as the North America editor of the BBC thinking, hold on a second, you've got an organisation which doctored a clip to make the President of the United States say something he didn't say, and now you've got the international editor, not a junior person, a very, very senior broadcaster, calling him a liar. How can they expect to impartially broadcast and do journalism in regard to what happens in the White House and what Donald Trump says?
Well, I think you're mixing a couple of things up, because Donald Trump is suing the BBC over the doctored clip from Panorama, which was inexcusable. I don't know how that managed to get through. And, it has cost two people their jobs ultimately, including the Director General and the Head of News. But just because that happened, it doesn't mean that that the journalists at the BBC can't speak truth to power and can't say it as it is and give clear analysis where it is justified and ask difficult questions. And that's absolutely right.
But they might not have.
I think you do have a point about, I think it's a good question to ask. Would a political editor or political correspondent at the BBC, where there was incontrovertible evidence that a senior politician in the UK had lied, would they give an essay or a comment along those lines? I think that's a good question, Peter. I hope that they would, where it was called for and where there was absolutely clear evidence.
Well, the point I would say is that we knew, for example, that Tony Blair lied about weapons of mass destruction. That is absolutely something that happened.
Well, a lie is something which to be untrue at the time you say it. Not a lie is not something that turns out not to be correct afterwards.
Okay.
You and I know that there is a difference between that.
Okay, there are numerous occasions when it would have been conceivable for, if the same standards were applied for Andrew Marr at the time, I think it was BBC political editor at the time, or Nick Robinson or whoever, to say, David Cameron has lied about this, or, classic example, right? Ken Livingstone, for example, wouldn't apologise to a Jewish reporter who he compared to a Nazi. He said, I can't believe something I can't say something I don't believe in my heart. Yet he said he would never stand as an independent to be mayor of London. So, right, here we go. Forget about the reporter for a second. You can say, Ken Livingstone, he's a liar. He said he wouldn't stand as an independent for mayor of London. Now he's stood to be mayor of London. He has lied. That has changed. He might argue the circumstances have changed. I have never, in my 41 years of watching and listening to the BBC, ever heard a journalist call someone a liar. And my point is, I'm not blaming you for this, Danny. I'm simply asking, is there a double standard here because it's Donald Trump? I don't support every single thing Donald Trump does. I don't think he's necessarily someone who tells the truth all the time. But I wonder if it would happen with any other politician, whether it would happen with a Democrat and whether it would happen in the UK.
I don't think there is another politician like Donald Trump. I've never.
There are other politicians who lie.
I've never come across someone like him who speaks so much all the time, and so much of what he says, he says one thing one day, something else the next day. He insults people. He treats people appallingly sometimes.
So how do you cover that impartially?
And he does lie. So it's like, I don't think anyone's come across anyone like that. I think there's a difference between people being saying one thing one day and then doing something else the next day. That happens a lot in politics. With David Lammy, at the moment is under fire over the jury reforms because of his previous support for the jury system, and now he's trying to rein back on them.
But this is kind of
hypocrisy is often called out.
We slightly have a point of. I don't think we're even necessarily disagreeing too much, Danny. But I think the point is that there are lots of times when hypothetically you could do it. There are times when you could say Boris Johnson said one thing, did another. Keir Starmer said one thing, did another. This is, as you say, politicians contradict themselves. They change, they make promises that aren't delivered, and all the rest of it. You could, in theory, do it a lot. But I'm just wondering whether the same standard is applied to everybody, because I've never heard it before. I suppose that's the key point I would have out of it. And in fairness to you, Danny, you said it's a good question to ask, so thank you for that. I just wonder about whoever the new Director General is. Do you think it should be someone from outside the organisation? Is the BBC rescuable, do you think, in its current form, especially as so many people don't think the licence fee should exist as how it does? Maybe those are two separate arguments, but I just wonder, is it rescuable in its current form?
Look, it's definitely rescuable. I don't think it needs rescuing as such. It's had some really bad moments over the past couple of years. Undoubtedly, big organisations do go through crises like that, and the way they've handled them has not been great. But if you look at all the figures, I can't remember what they were. Tim Davie was reciting them. The vast majority of the country still consume BBC output. Some of it is exceptional. Some of it is mediocre. But there's a lot of really good stuff there. So it can survive. I'm not a supporter of the licence fee. I think there needs to be a better way.
What do you think that better way is? Because, there are loads of people who pay far more than they do for the licence fee. I pay $5.99 a month for Netflix, which is wouldn't actually equate to it. But loads of Prime Video, for example, is £8.99 a month. I pay for that. That's £95 a year. Put them together, and I've paid more than the licence fee for two streaming services, one of which I don't actually use that much. So what is the better way, do you think? Because individual programs as well is interesting. On Amazon Prime, you can buy, one episode of The West Wing or whatever it is you're watching for £1.89. I think that's not a bad idea either.
I think the collection has got to be better. Personally, I wish that collection system could be incorporated with another tax. For example, the council tax, so you didn't have to have a separate system of collection. I think that would save some money and make it easier. I think that there then possibly should be two tiers. There should be a basic tier that everyone gets for paying their licence fee, and then a super tier. You get programmes, you get access to them earlier. You get perhaps certain classes of programmes that you don't get on the basic tier. That's my rough idea about it. But I do believe in having the BBC. I think it does actually raise the standard of the other creative industries in the country. It brings a huge amount to areas where there are BBC offices, in Salford, for example, in Cardiff. It does a huge amount for the economy. There's a huge amount of talent that's nurtured by the BBC that then also goes on to work for Talk and GB News and other outlets. Most of those people have worked at the BBC at some point.
The BBC gave both of us jobs, Danny, so maybe it's not maybe it's not all that bad after all. Danny, listen, thank you. Really interesting discussion. We covered a lot of ground there. Danny Shaw, crime and policing journalist, a former advisor to the former Home Secretary Yvette Cooper as well. Did a little bit of Home Affairs at the start of that. Lots more to discuss. We'll talk about Michigan in a second with Jake Wallace-Simons and author of Israelophobia, Never Again, How the West Betrayed the Jews and Itself. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
There are reports from Israel at the moment about a 17-year-old having been run over and killed in the last hour in central Israel while running to a shelter. We'll see if we can get more information on that. Thank you to Elisa in Chelmsford, who says, no to a licence fee. I want to choose what I watch, not be forced to pay for something I don't watch. That's fair enough, but I mean, I pay $8.99, I think it is, a month for Amazon Prime. I don't watch probably 1% of the programs on it. Similarly with Netflix, $5.99 a month. I have the cheapo option. I don't use it that much. Maybe I shouldn't have it, but you're paying for stuff that you don't watch anyway, and that's part of it. Dee in Chesterfield says, why do the BBC, the Prime Minister and the Civil Service think it's okay to spend our money so carelessly? Is it because they don't know or care about the income of the average person? The sums offered to Mandelson and illegal immigrants can only be dreamed of by people on minimum wage or disability allowance, says Dee in Chesterfield. And Sarah says, why should I pay for a TV licence through my council tax when I don't consume a single second of BBC content ever? It's a fair point. I want to talk a little bit about Michigan and what has happened there. The active shooter, well, there was an active shooter, he's now dead, and we know that there was a security guard who was injured there. Jake Wallace-Simons, the author and columnist, is with us. Jake, what is your reaction to what has happened there? Thankfully, it now seems to be over, but a dreadful reminder of the huge level of anti-Semitism there is, not just in this country, but in America and around the world.
Yeah, whenever there's an attack on a synagogue, and it's sad that I have to open with that sentence because it's become so frequent these days.
Yes.
There's always a sort of double sense, one of a great horror and a sense of fear. but also a sense of inevitability that sooner or later this is going to happen again and again and keep happening, because society as a whole is not closing down anti-Semitism enough, is indulging it too much, is allowing it to run rampant through universities, on the streets and elsewhere. And so the consequence inevitably is going to be acts of violence on a sadly, a far too frequent basis.
The story, I mean, a very concerning story, but one that has concerned me here in the UK is about Foreign Office civil servants going to celebrate the Islamic Revolution at the Iranian embassy. Sometimes diplomats have to hold their nose and do things they don't want to do, but there was absolutely no need whatsoever for Foreign Office officials to be there to stand for the Iranian national anthem, especially on the same day as a human rights group said that on that day 7,000 people had been murdered by the regime.
Yeah, it's bizarre. I mean, diplomats seem sometimes to live in an entirely parallel universe. I was speaking to somebody from the UN recently, and during the war, it's business as usual there for the Iranian diplomats. They're still chairing the same committees, maybe human rights committees. They're still going to the same meetings, sitting in the same places, having the same contribution towards world affairs as they have been for the last 47 years. And other diplomats play along, dignifying them, almost normalising the regime.
Well, Antonio Guterres, the head of the United Nations, the Secretary General, congratulated Iran on the 47 years of its after its revolution. I mean, that is absolutely shameful. And they lecture us about human rights.
Yeah, I mean, during the massacres in Tehran, he did that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a structural problem with the UN and with diplomacy as a whole, which is that at the UN, most of the nations that are members of the UN are not democracies, they are autocracies. And so, including, of course, Russia and China, who are two of the members, permanent members of the UN Security Council. And so, basically, a democratic open system includes a majority of countries that are not open or democratic. And so, the first thing they do is use that system against the West and against our interests. And you can see that again, you know, with that reception attended by civil servants or Foreign Office diplomats. I mean, from their point of view, they're doing their job, maintaining relations with countries that they might not agree with, but actually take a step back. And it's not just a country that you don't agree with, it's a country that's massacred more than 30,000 people in 2 days, innocent people on its own streets, and is using the conventions of diplomacy to soften the blow and to advance its agenda on the world stage to the advantage of the murderous mullahs in charge.
And he's still here. He's still here. Sayed al-Musavi, Iran's ambassador to the UK, gave that speech on that day praising the Iranian regime, attacking Western sanctions on Tehran, saying for nearly half a century Iran has faced relentless pressure from the 8-year imposed war and severe sanctions acts of sabotage and terrorism. Nevertheless, by relying on domestic capabilities, national cohesion and empowered human resources, it has achieved significant progress. I mean, so many euphemisms in there I'll not even dignify, but it is absolutely disgraceful. Priti Patel, the shadow foreign secretary, saying it's disgraceful in the wake of the Iranian government slaughtering tens of thousands of its own citizens and making bellicose threats to the West. Foreign Office officials have been paying homage to the Islamic Revolution in Iran. My point to her when I interviewed Priti Patel, who was of course Home Secretary a few years ago, is why did you not prescribe the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard, when you had the chance as Home Secretary? She said the context had changed. I'm not sure that answer satisfied me, and we have a situation where there will be an Al-Quds, not a march anymore, but a gathering, certainly, to celebrate the Iranian regime, to celebrate what Ayatollah Ali Khamenei achieved, if the word is used advisedly, in his life, and to say that Islamism is the way forward. It's absolutely disgraceful, and the opportunity was there to prescribe the IRGC. It still is at this exact moment.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually interviewing Richard Dearlove, the former chief of MI6, just earlier today for my podcast, and I talked about these matters, and he said that the word that comes to mind is appeasement.
Yep.
It's appeasement, and that's from within the security services. There's absolutely no reason why the Tories shouldn't have prescribed the IRGC. There's no reason why Labour hasn't done so. There's no reason why they shouldn't have closed the Ayatollah's London office. I mean, irony of ironies, he was killed in his office in Tehran while his office in London remains open to this day.
Yeah. And that
as you pointed
the
out,
property owned by his son hasn't been seized either, the new Ayatollah.
Hasn't been seized.
Yeah.
And not only that, but as you pointed out, the Iranian ambassador to London has not even been expelled from London. He gave an interview on the BBC just the other day.
That's right.
I mean, this is just appeasement, appeasement, appeasement. And, you know, I just feel that the UK, I wonder what it will take for us to wake up, for our leadership classes to wake up. And I fear that it will be an experience of intense suffering at the hands of these people that's going to finally cause the scales to fall from their eyes and to think, what the hell have we been doing all along?
And at least the BBC did challenge him on some of his answers, unlike, of course, the Guardian newspaper that had the foreign minister write a column for them, write an opinion piece in the paper, and it was that propaganda was pumped out by the Guardian newspaper. Absolutely shameful, Jake.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two things going on here. One is that we've lost touch with the rights and wrongs with our values. We're privileging, you know, the process. You know, let's give each side a fair say, rather than recognising that one side is right and the other side is evil. And I think the other thing is that let's just face it, the elephant in the room here is Palestine. When it comes to people like the Guardian, they care mainly about Israel.
As we know, Jake, Israel's always wrong. No matter what they do or say, they're always wrong in the Guardian's view.
Yeah, and there's no enemy of Israel that's so repulsive and repugnant and brutal that it won't get a fond hearing at The Guardian. I'm afraid that's just the truth.
What's the name of your podcast? Where can people get it?
It's called The Brink. I present it with Andrew Fox, the former parachute regiment officer, who's on talk quite a lot as well.
Yeah, I've interviewed him many times,
And we've got an episode with Richard Dilov dropping tomorrow. We had Norman Rule, the CIA Iran expert, on a couple of weeks ago. We've had Tom Sharp, the Royal Navy officer of 27 years, all analysing the Iran war. So it's been really good, actually.
Excellent. Great stuff. I'm sure you can get that anywhere you download podcasts, yeah?
Anywhere you like. It's called The Brink. Join us on The Brink.
Do listen to that, but not between 7 and 10, Monday to Friday. Jake, thank you. That's Jake Wallace-Simons, the author, a columnist, and indeed podcaster. So you can check out his podcast if you like. He always speaks a lot of sense, as does Andrew Fox. Lots more to talk about in the final hour, including Facebook had a major boob over a ludicrous blurring of a mannequin of the female body after a CPR lesson was put forward. Fascinating story. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, it's just gone 9 o'clock. Thank you so much for your company here on Talk. I'm here for the next hour and loads to discuss, including Peter Mandelson. Has he betrayed Britain? Keir Starmer is in Northern Ireland today. He's been talking about what he apologises for, but what is he actually apologising for doing? We'll talk to Kevin Schofield, who's political editor at HuffPost UK. We'll also talk about British troops being attacked by Iranian drones and another anti-Semitic attack in the USA. We'll talk too about a bizarre story in regard to a charity, an air ambulance charity. We'll speak to the chief executive. They put a campaign out about CPR, about making sure that women, their bras can be removed. Basically, if you're doing CPR, it's really important to do that if they're in a medical emergency. And they put the mannequin, which was the torso of a woman, generic woman, on Facebook. Facebook took it down because of the fact that it showed breasts on a mannequin for demonstrative purposes in terms of how to help someone who's in a life crisis. So we'll talk to the chief executive of that air ambulance a little bit later on. Loads to discuss. I know there are people who want to talk about Starmer, who want to talk about immigration, about Iran as well. Whatever it is you want to talk about between now and 10 o'clock, do give me a shout. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, send me a voice note less than a minute please, send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch, even the people who think I'm talking rubbish. Lots to discuss here on Talk. Stay with us. Let me read out a couple of tweets before we get to our next guest. Elma says, if I was convicted of breaking the law and was refusing to go to prison, should the government resort to giving me money to encourage me to prison? So why can't the government just kick out those asylum seekers whose endless costly appeals to stay here fail? The Home Office haven't told us what's happened and how many people have taken the 10 grand to leave. Also, Adrian says, I can't be bothered to argue with people like Michael Yaki, who you had on a bit earlier on. Trump can eradicate disease and he's still find fault with it. Elisa says, no to the licence fee. Sorry, I've read that out previously. And Laurie says, you let your last guest away, Danny Shaw. You let him get away with murder. Talking as if the BBC has nothing to apologise for. Really? You have this no-nonsense positive attitude that seems to evaporate under pressure, says Laurie in Streatham. Well, I do think we had a reasonable discussion about the BBC. I made it very, very clear. I think the BBC should have apologised for many things, including the Hugh Edwards debacle, and I think it's right that Tim Davie goes. I put my points across, but yeah, maybe I've known Danny Shaw for some years. Maybe I should have been a little bit harder on him. But listen, this is not an exact science. I will make mistakes in every 3-hour programme, and thank you, Laurie, for your opinion on that. I think we'll disagree without being disagreeable, which is what we do on these programmes. Chris in Ireland says, please give our love to the Jewish community. Believe me, we will. Well, firstly, thank you for that, Chris. And we will be talking actually about anti-Semitism in Ireland at some point over the next couple of nights. We're trying to get one specific guest on that. But Chris, you're someone who clearly has great admiration and love for the Jewish community, and I'm delighted to hear that, as I do too. Let's talk about Peter Mandelson now, because Keir Starmer was actually in my part of the world earlier today, Northern Ireland, and he said this about the 147-page dossier that's come out on Peter Mandelson. The Prime Minister speaking earlier.
Let me start where I must start, which is to accept, as I do, that I made a mistake in appointing Peter Mandelson. And let me follow that up swiftly, as I've done before, but I need to do it again, with an apology to the victims of Epstein for appointing Peter Mandelson. It was my mistake, and I take responsibility in relation to it. The release of the information shows what was known. That led to further questions being asked. Unfortunately, because of the Metropolitan Police investigation, we can't release that information yet. But that doesn't take away from the fact that it was me that made the mistake, and it's me that makes the apology to the victims of Epstein, and I do that.
That wasn't good enough for Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Conservatives.
For so long, the Prime Minister has tried to make this about Peter Mandelson's lies. What this shows is that it is Keir Starmer himself who has lied repeatedly since the very start to the whole country about what he knew, when and how. And these files have exposed the fact that the Prime Minister has not been honest with the country or with the Commons about the extent to which he knew about this relationship.
Let's talk to Kevin Schofield, who is political editor at HuffPost UK. Kevin, great to talk to you. Do you know what the Prime Minister was actually apologising for? Because there's a big question, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, it seems as though he was apologising, Peter, to the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, basically acknowledging that he should not have appointed Peter Mandelson. I wonder, though, whether that is enough. In fact, I don't think it is enough. I don't think the victims of Jeffrey Epstein will accept that apology. I think they, like the rest of us, if they look at the documents that were released yesterday, will see that it was there in black and white why the Prime Minister would have been well within his rights not to appoint Peter Mandelson at all. Now, he says in his clip there that those that the vetting threw up other questions, which he then put to Peter Mandelson, and he is unable at the moment to tell us what the answers were because of the police investigation. But really, I think any fair-minded person looking at it objectively will say, well, why on earth did you even consider giving him the job after reading what the Cabinet Office officials had found out about him?
You have probably looked at the 147 pages in detail. Not going to quiz you on, what was in paragraph 7 of page 63, but what give us a broader picture as a political editor. Give us a broader picture of what we know and what questions still remain from this 147 pages. And as you say, there's so much more that we haven't been told. It's been held back by the Met. And some people will argue, viewers and listeners arguing it already, and I think with some justification, that the government will hide behind that and the full truth won't come out for some time to come.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, this was just the first tranche. There are many more documents still to be released. We don't know when that will be. Now, obviously, some of it is because of the police investigation. Things like WhatsApp messages between Peter Mandelson and ministers, I think those would be very interesting to read if and when we eventually do. But I mean, just to boil down those 147 pages, I think what screams off the page really is that there were more than enough reasons for Keir Starmer to hit the pause button at the very least on appointing Peter Mandelson. I think what comes across very clearly is that it was already decided, regardless of what was in these documents, that Peter Mandelson was going to get the job. Morgan McSweeney.
And sorry to interrupt you, but as is sometimes the case in government, the vetting sort of retrofits what the decision that's already been made, and that's never a good idea.
No, exactly. Morgan McSweeney, who was the Chief of Staff for Keir Starmer at that time, close ally of Peter Mandelson, his very strong advice was, you've got to make him the US ambassador. Now, the arguments for doing that were that he's a consummate political operator. He is in with the Trump set. He could be very good at being a bridge between the UK government and Donald Trump. But it also is very clear from these documents that there was huge skeletons in Peter Mandelson's cupboard, and that they were that the links between him and Jeffrey Epstein, the ongoing links, even after Jeffrey Epstein had been convicted, were well known. They'd been reported in the Financial Times. They had appeared in other publications, and it's there in black and white. It says there is a reputational risk to the government of appointing Peter Mandelson. Jonathan Powell, who obviously worked for Tony Blair, knew Peter Mandelson very well. He expressed his concerns about it being weirdly rushed, the whole process.
He's now the National Security Advisor and a key advisor to Starmer, yeah.
And he said it's been a weirdly rushed process. And this, as I say, feeds into the idea or the fact, really, that the decision had already been taken, that Peter Mandelson is going to get the job regardless pretty much of what was in these vetting documents. Because I think if you were coming at it objectively as the Prime Minister, you would think, reading these documents, maybe it's not such a good idea, maybe we should look elsewhere. But clearly the decision had already been taken. And they probably didn't think that these documents would ever see the light of day. They have. And it's deeply embarrassing for the Prime Minister.
What is your sense? I mean, we can look at the polls, we can see what people think of Starmer. He's one of the most, well, he is the most unpopular Prime Minister at this stage in his in time as a leader of our country. Kemi Badenoch alleging that the Labour whips have had some discussions with her whips apparently about a vote of no confidence. I wonder if that's true. I wonder if there are ways where that could actually happen. I mean, being around Parliament all day, every day as you are, what are Labour MPs saying to you, Kevin? Are they saying that this guy can last, that they're going to get rid of him after the after the local elections, or that they would do that themselves, or that they're waiting for others to do it? What is your sense, having those, conversations in the corridors of power, those teas and coffees that you have with MPs all the time? What are they actually telling you?
Well, strangely, it feels a little bit like the air has gone out of the anti-Starmer sentiment amongst Labour MPs. It reached a bit of a peak 3 or 4 weeks ago when Anas Sarwar, the Scottish Labour leader, called for him to resign. We were all expecting really others to follow, and I think in number 10 they were expecting it as well, and it was very dicey that day. Now, since then, there's been the Gorton and Denton by-election, which was obviously awful for Labour. We've got the elections coming on May the 7th. I still think that will be the real pinch point for Keir Starmer. If those elections are disastrous for Labour, then I think he's in an awful lot of trouble. But right now, we're almost in a period of calm. There was nothing in the Mandelson documents yesterday really that we didn't already know. All it did was confirm and have it down there in black and white. This is what the Prime Minister was shown. Yeah. So right now, I think Labour MPs are just keeping their powder dry. I think the morning to look out for is the 8th of May, the day after those elections in Scotland, Wales and across England. If they are as bad as the polls suggest, then that will be very dangerous indeed for Keir Starmer.
We have this development this evening as well about the Conservatives calling for an investigation by Sir Laurie Magnus, the independent advisor on ministerial standards. Do you think, alleging that the Prime Minister has broken the ministerial code, do you think that investigation is likely to happen?
I think reading it initially, I think probably not. I think it looks as though there's no hard evidence from Kemi Badenoch. It's a suspicion right now that these documents yesterday were not really the full story, that some things were handed back. There's one element she mentions about how there's no annotation, there are no notes from the Prime Minister, really handwritten notes from ministers, which is quite unusual. If you've looked, and you'll know this, Peter, but if you look at documents, government documents from the past, say released under the 30-year rule, there are always little remarks, handwritten remarks from Prime Ministers, etc. There was an absence of that, which I did think was a little bit unusual, but there's no hard and fast evidence that things have been withheld. Were that to be the case, then that would be a very serious matter, because this was a parliamentary vote, a humble address, that all these documents were to be revealed. So if things have been withheld, then that would be a serious matter indeed. But I think without hard evidence of that, then I think there's not maybe that much for Laurie Magnus to investigate.
So in your estimation, do you feel that obviously this is a blow for the government, and nobody's arguing that it isn't, it's a blow for Keir Starmer personally? Speaking to a Labour politician earlier on who said exactly that. I just wonder, will Kemi Badenoch's trying to make political weather, she's trying to make political progress through this. I just wonder if anybody will make political progress, or will it be sort of like a tennis match in that your opponent loses rather than you winning, because there was no slam dunk yesterday?
Yeah, I think it's just another nail in the coffin. It's just another piece of evidence, another stick to beat Keir Starmer with, really. It's almost like it was priced in that this was going to be bad for Keir Starmer, and undoubtedly it was bad for him. It's embarrassing that he's had to come out again and apologise. And this is a story with a long tail. There are more documents to come out. The police investigation will proceed, I'm sure, for many, many months indeed. So it's not a story that's going to go away anytime soon. It will continue bubbling up again for the government. So by no means is this the end of the matter. It's bad for Keir Starmer. Right now, it's not fatal. I think the public will have a big say on whether or not he survives in number 10 come those elections at the beginning of May.
Kevin, thank you. That is Kevin Schofield, who is political editor at the Huffington Post UK. I really appreciate him joining us this evening. What do you think of what he had to say? 0344 499 1000. Give me a ring and let me know what you think. Phil in Portsmouth says, "Hi Peter, I give up. I just give up. I would love to be a fly on the wall in about 100 years' time," says Phil. And Becca says, "For the fourth day, when is your mugshot going to be in the lineup on the Talk adverts?" I feel it every time anyone mentions this. I feel a bit like, do you ever see that film With Neil and I, where he goes throughout the film and Richard E. Grant, it's a brilliant film. He goes throughout and goes, "What happened to my cigar commercial? What happened to my agent?" He's this out of work actor who's been promised the cigar commercial. Becca, I have breaking news, and the breaking news is that I am having a big meeting with all the people in a mysterious part of the building called creative. I don't really know what happens there, but I think they're in charge of these things, and I'm having a meeting with them next week, and I will be bringing your demands to them as to why I am not in the lineup. But we're going to have all sorts of magical mystery things that creative, whoever they are, whatever they do, are going to make, and maybe I'll even be in the lineup. You never know, although I think it's perhaps not their decision. But thank you to everybody who's asking the question. I mean, it's very nice, it's very flattering, and listen, I'm just glad to be sitting here in the evenings. It's fabulous to be here from 7 to 10, 5 nights a week. And Gareth in Cardiff says, here we go, great show as always. We missed your weekend shows, but we'd like to know if you find your new weekday evening schedule more challenging than your weekend shows. It is certainly different, Gareth. It is definitely a different thing. There's a slightly different vibe. Every show is different anyway, but every time of the day is different. I'm working with a new team as well. I know everybody on the team, but we haven't worked together as much, and that's a new thing, and we're learning each other, how each other works. We're actually recruiting a new producer as well. The brilliant Dean is there, seeing the transition, betting me in to the new slot, but there's going to be a new permanent producer, and indeed applications are open right now. If you want to talk in my ear and tell me what to say, you can apply to be the producer of this programme. Which is on the News UK website, should you wish. But listen, thank you for all your lovely messages, and I'll stop being self-indulgent now and talk about what we're meant to be talking about, which is the Iran-US war, and Simon Diggins is going to join me next to find out exactly what's been happening today about the Supreme Leader, who's apparently in a coma after losing a leg, and the messages that he has put out as well, whether they're him or whether it's simply the regime. Whatever you want to say, however you want to say it, 0344 499 1000 is the only number you need. Stay with us here on Talk.
Conflict breaks out anywhere in the world, it has consequences here at home. Talk War is your definitive national security briefing. From the conflict in Ukraine to the tensions in Gaza and the latest escalation with Iran, this is where you'll find comprehensive comment and expert analysis with multiple updates throughout the day. The Talk War podcast from Talk, available on the Talk app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Eileen, who's been in touch on that breaking news about an hour and 20 minutes ago about the Conservatives calling for an investigation into a potential cover-up with the release of the Mandelson documents. That is a senior member of Kemi Badenoch's shadow cabinet, has written to Sir Laurie Magnus, the independent advisor on ministerial standards, and Eileen says someone needs to, or this will be another, probably the worst of Starmer's deceptions and manoeuvring in her estimation. Keep your comments coming in. You can text me at 7222 with the word talk in your text. You can send me a tweet at talkTV, or follow me at Peter Cardwell. I'm also on Instagram at Cardwell Peter as well, if you want to join me there. Mainly cat photos, though, not a lot of political analysis, it must be said. Right then, let's talk about British troops being attacked by Iranian drones. I also want to talk about the civil servants who celebrated the Islamic Revolution at the Iranian embassy. This is our own civil servants, the people you and I pay for in the Foreign Office, and what the new supreme leader in Iran is up to. Maybe we'll start with that with Simon Diggins, who's my favourite military and defence analyst, Colonel Simon Diggins. Simon, good evening.
Peter, good evening to you.
Iran's new supreme leader warning the US to close its Gulf bases immediately or face further attacks. But we don't actually know about Mujtaba Khamenei. He hasn't been seen or heard from since the US-Israeli strikes, and people think that he might be dead or severely injured. What do we know, and how seriously do you think we should take this message?
Well, I think that the message is absolutely typical for the regime. It's full of defiance, full of bluff, full of bluster, full of hate. It's exactly the message that they've been propagating for a while now. So nothing new particularly about that. What do we know about his particular condition is very little, is the honest answer. What we do know, and this comes from Iranian sources, is that members of his family, members of his close family, were killed and badly wounded at the same time as his father was. And given the kind of the cultural issues that go there, my gut feeling is that he was probably part of that. Whether he's dead or not, or just badly injured, is hard to tell. But the fact that when this announcement came out on Iranian television, it wasn't broadcast by him. It was broadcast by a female announcer, which so clearly they're worried about retribution from the Israelis. But it's unusual, I think, for somebody who's trying to establish a sort of leadership over his own people to use a substitute to do so.
It's interesting as well that the health minister in Iran may well have operated on the new supreme leader. He's apparently a well-known and trauma surgeon of some ability. I mean, obviously, he is a horrible person and a member of the regime, but it's interesting that Mujtaba Khamenei has been elected to this role, perhaps even in absentia, perhaps even conceivably without his knowledge, if he is in a coma.
Well, I think that's right. I think it does actually show you how, at the top end, anyway, the regime is in real trouble. I mean, it's not just his father who was killed, but some 40-plus other individuals were killed who might be regarded as the top leadership. And the Israelis have continued to do quite a good job of targeting those individuals. They killed a senior IRGC commander in Lebanon the last couple of days. So it's not a job with a long-term life prospect at the moment anyway, any of those appointments. So I think that's part of it. But the fact that they couldn't think of anybody to pick apart from the late Khamenei's son, I think indicates how limited they really are. They sidelined the president, who tried to reach out to the Arab countries and say apologising for effectively drawing you into our war, and he was then forced to publicly apologise for the fact that he sort of rode backwards from that. What we do see, I think, is the IRGC has clearly got a significant grip of the country, and this is very much now, and it has been for a while, but now very clearly under pressure, a kind of security state akin to North Korea or Eritrea, and not a normal country into which we might have a diplomatic conversation.
Yes.
There's no indication at all of giving way any of the demands of the Americans prior to the war.
The way that most of our viewers and listeners are going to be affected by war in Iran at the moment is petrol prices, fuel prices, and we know a lot of people, especially where I come from in Northern Ireland, have oil-fired central heating rather than gas or electric. And with the continued blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, which Khamenei Jr. has apparently called for to continue this chokehold on global oil flows, that's going to be a really tangible effect that will go on for some time to come. The price of oil rocketing up, and of course that blockade is something that cannot be targeted. Is that a viable option? Also, there are worries about mines in the strait as well. What's your assessment of that?
Well, the assessment it is a strategic stranglehold point, choke point for the world. It's very narrow. It's 35 kilometres wide from the northern tip of the Ras Musandam, which is actually part of Oman, to the Iranian coast. So it's very easy for the Iranians using missiles, and they've got lots of missile batteries, short-range missile batteries, and anti-shipping missile batteries on that sort of north and northeastern shore, and mines will also be part of it. Now, we know Donald Trump and the the admiral in charge of US CENTCOM has said that they will establish clear the Straits of Hormuz and establish convoys. That's hard work, because what the Iranians are doing is they're using their small patrol boats. They're very fast patrol boats, astonishingly fast actually. Well over 100 knots, which is quite extraordinary speed. Equipment missiles. And with mines. So, and the way they're going to be doing, they're going to be hiding at the moment in all the hundreds and hundreds of inlets and whatever. They're not going to be lined up neatly in a dock waiting to be taken out by the next B-1B that's flying overhead. So you get into the game then, already, if you're actually going to deal with them, it gets down to what you might call retail fighting, which is exactly what the Americans are trying to avoid and the Israelis are trying to avoid. You're going into these inlets after the individual boats and their crew and trying to kill them. That really means boots on the ground. We're a very, very heavy air presence, but very localized air presence, not the kind of strategic bombing campaign we've seen at the moment.
Simon, you talked a little bit about the diplomatic means that are no longer at our disposal, although here in the UK, of course, we have the ambassador, we have the diplomatic staff of Iran, and we have news as well that the Foreign Office staff attended a party at the Iranian embassy to celebrate the Islamic Revolution just weeks after the regime massacred thousands of its own people. Video footage shows attendees from the Foreign Office, from our own diplomats, our own civil servants that you and I and our viewers and listeners pay for, standing in silence for a rendition of Iran's national anthem. On the same day as the event, 12th of February, the human rights activist news agency announced at least 7,000 people had been murdered by the regime in Iran, including 219 children. Absolutely shameful, Simon.
No, totally shameful. And I can give you one very kind of close personal example of that. In 2009, I was the British Defence Attaché in Kabul, and that was the time when we had another uprising in Iran. And at the time, the orders were then given out: no more conversations, negotiations, or contact with Iranian personnel. It has to be said, this was a slightly uneasy relationship with the Iranians from about 2001 to 2009. Indeed, in 2001, it actually helped us in the invasion of Afghanistan, because they were so angry with the Taliban, who of course was Sunni and very aggressive towards the Shia. But 2009, this uprising took place. I think they call it the Green Revolution. The Green Revolution took place, heavily suppressed, and we were absolutely told have no contact with Iranians. So for the rest of my time, it was over a year, we had no formal contact or informal contact with Iranian diplomats. It is fair to say normal business to be talking to them, but you have actually also then got to use your judgment and look at the optics. And the optics are frankly awful. So somebody within the Foreign Office has absolutely failed to do their job and actually look at this thing, actually in the current circumstances, do we want to be seen with the Iranians or not, knowing that they would exploit this, and they failed miserably so doing.
Simon, thank you. That's Simon Diggins there, who is a military and defence analyst, former colonel in the UK Army. Appreciate his contribution. Thanks to everybody who has been in touch as well. Another person says, I think you did a good job, Peter, with Danny Shaw. You cornered him well. Well, thank you. Keir Starmer, written Keir Stalin here anyway, some people call him that, only apologised to the victims of Epstein. He should, however, he didn't apologise to us, the public of the UK. He represents us and we deserve an apology, as he knew about Mandelson beforehand and did what he did anyway. It is shameful. In a moment, we're going to talk about a bizarre story about Facebook censoring a very good campaign by an excellent charity to raise awareness of CPR procedures when women need that to happen. Loads to discuss here on Talk. We'll talk to the Chief Executive of that charity in a second. We'll take more of your calls as well between now and 10 o'clock. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now then, let's talk about a very strange story. There's a really good charity called the Thames Valley Air Ambulance, and it needs to raise a lot of money every year, as these air ambulance charities do. Its chief executive is a really indefatigable leader called Amanda McLean, who's going to join us in a second. And what they did was they put out a really good campaign talking about women and CPR, and it's different because men and women have different anatomies, obviously. And as part of their campaign, part of what they put out was a mannequin, like you see in the shops, of a woman with, obviously, breasts, showing that it's a bit different when you do CPR on a woman as it is to a man. Amanda will give us these details in a second about their campaign. Then they put it on Facebook, who decided to take the photograph down because it showed female anatomy. Well, it didn't. It showed a mannequin on female anatomy. Obviously, the campaign is a really important one, and I want to talk about that, but also what Facebook did. We have asked them for a comment on it. They haven't got back to us just yet. But Amanda joins me now, Amanda McLean, who's Chief Executive of the Thames Valley Air Ambulance. Good evening, Amanda.
Evening.
Just tell us, first of all, about your campaign.
So one of the things we found when we went to cardiac arrests is that the women we were going to were less likely to receive CPR than men. And we go to a lot of cardiac arrests, about 3 a day. And for us, it's really important that people get CPR and use of a defib, if possible, before we arrive, to give a much better chance. And people are understandably a little bit more nervous about doing that for women, because they're nervous about the anatomy. As you say, women have breasts. People are nervous about exposing that, and they're nervous generally about what goes on. So we've started a big campaign just to destigmatise it, to talk about it, to acknowledge those concerns, to explain why it's important, and to make people more confident in giving CPR generally, but particularly giving CPR to women. And as part of that, on International Women's Day, we put some photographs out to support the campaign, and one of those showed a mannequin, a female mannequin, and it was taken down by Facebook because it was deemed to breach the community standards.
So we can see on the screen there, if people are watching, if they're listening on the radio, I will explain it to them. You've got all the detail there, and on the top left, you've got a kind of censorship of that photo. Now, it's interesting in that they've done that. Have you had a conversation with Facebook? What have they said to you?
So the communications team have been in contact with them, and we are trying. We've managed to get one photograph up where we've just had to blur the nipples because female nipples aren't regarded as acceptable. And we are continuing to pursue that. But in the meantime, we're actually using this as another opportunity to get the message out. If it's deemed unacceptable to do that, showing a mannequin on a social media post as part of education, then it makes it so much harder to get across the message that you shouldn't be afraid to do it if you need to in the real case scenario.
So what should you actually do if you're in that situation and someone needs CPR and you're trained? Obviously, you shouldn't do it unless you're trained to do, or you're
well,
taught.
Anybody can do it.
Okay, tell me
anybody
about that.
Can do it. I'll teach you to do it sometime, Peter.
Okay.
So what the most important thing, if you think someone's in cardiac arrest, is to do something. So assuming it's safe to approach them, you call for help. You dial 999, put your phone on loudspeaker and start CPR, start chest compressions. And then hopefully somebody that you called for help will get a defib that's available nearby. And then you need to apply the pads from the defib to someone's bare chest, and the defib will then talk you through it. You need to put the pads on bare skin while CPR is still ongoing. So it's really hard to try and do that and position the pads well without removing all of the clothing.
And that includes a woman's bra?
That includes a woman's bra as well. In theory, you could try and do it without removing the bra, but in practice, it's going to make the placement of those pads almost impossible, and it's going to delay, and every second matters. We've talked to female cardiac arrest survivors about this, and they are passionate about our campaign and saying, honestly, modesty should never get in the way of saving a life.
I totally agree with that, and I think everybody watching and listening will agree with that. Can you understand the slight reticence? I mean, reticence and worry and embarrassment will cost lives in the longer term, won't it?
Absolutely. Well, but we do understand people will feel like that. You know, men and women will feel like that, which is precisely why we're having this campaign and we're talking about it so much. So we're delivering training to people so they can get confidence in doing it and have a go. And that includes having mannequins with what the manufacturers call breast attachments. We're teaching people how to cut a bra off. There will be special scissors in the case for the defib. We're talking about it very openly. We're sharing realistic pictures on mannequins so people know what it looks like, because the more we can talk about it and the more we can try to destigmatize it and explain why it's so important, then hopefully the more likely it is that people will feel confident if they're in that situation.
How important is the work of the Thames Valley Air Ambulance and air ambulance charities more broadly? Because I think a lot of people don't know that you've got to raise a heck of a lot of money every year to keep them going, don't you?
We do indeed. So in Thames Valley, we need to raise between 14 and 15 million pounds to cover our 3 counties of Oxfordshire, Berkshire and Buckinghamshire. But there are 21 air ambulance charities that cover the United Kingdom. And we're all charities. We all raise money and we go to the people who are the most seriously injured. Most do trauma and medical. And we give care to people that goes above and beyond that, provided by our wonderful ambulance service colleagues. And we can really make a difference. And we can only do that because the public support us. So supporting us with fundraising, supporting us in our campaigns, doing things that they can to help makes a massive difference.
Amanda, thank you very much. That's Amanda McLean. I look forward to you teaching me how to do CPR. That'll be an interesting day, no doubt. Amanda McLean there, who is Chief Executive of Thames Valley Air Ambulance. What do you think of that, of Facebook doing that? On the campaign more generally, I think it's a really good idea, and actually Facebook being a bit silly on this perhaps actually gives a bit more publicity to the Thames Valley Air Ambulance, and rightly so. They're right to take this opportunity to publicise it. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call if you've got a view on that. On Starmer, Leo has been in touch from Rotherham. Leo, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
I'd just like to say thank you for having me on, by the way.
You're very welcome, Leo.
I just think it's about time Starmer and co. fell on their own sword, because this country now, I have always been proud to be British, but the way consecutive governments, and especially with this latest government, I look at them and we haven't got a politician. And we're going to go down and down and down.
If you get rid of Starmer, though, Leo, who's next? Who would you want to lead the country?
We're going to go down and down and down. Because we just not got anybody that can... We've no politicians anymore. And I've been around a long time, seeing as I'm nearly 81. But to be honest with you, I've said it many a time just lately. I'm glad I'm on the way out, because
really, you really feel that way, Leo? You really feel that way? You're glad you're on the way out, as you put it. I mean, that's a pretty depressing thing to think, is it not?
I know it is, but that's how I feel.
Yeah.
I've got kids and grandkids, and I fear for them.
But I think, Leo, what you need to do with those kids and grandkids is you need to sit them down and give them the benefit of your wisdom. Tell them the tales of when you think we're better and how they can be people who can make the country better, because they can do...
I've tried.
Yeah.
I've tried that, but you just think I'm a doddering old fool.
Well, you're not a doddering old fool at all, Leo. You've got some good ideas. What would make life better? What sort of leadership would you like to see? What policy would you like to be implemented? If you could wave a magic wand and get one thing sorted in this country, what would it be, Leo?
Well, I would like it if we went more down the American route and said we had midterm elections.
Yep.
So that now, if we could, instead of waiting another 3.5 years for an election, we could say in midterm we'll have another election.
Yeah.
And if they win, fair enough. If they don't, they prove the point.
Yeah, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens in those local elections. Well, Leo, listen, I hope you feel a bit better about the country as time goes on, and I want you to do me a favour. Will you do me a favour, Leo?
Yeah.
Okay, I want you to tell your kids and your grandkids that the man off the television says they have to listen to you and they need to listen to your wisdom and your ideas. They can say what their ideas are back, but they've got to listen to you. And the man off the telly says you've a lot of wisdom to impart. Is that okay?
All right, yes.
All right.
Still don't listen.
Well, give it a go. Leo, that's Leo in Rotherham there. Thank you to him. Let's go to Ben in South Wales. Ben, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Oh, thank you for having me on. I'd just like to say in response to Starmer, I know he's under a lot of criticism, and I know there's been mistakes made. But let's remember, you know, this country is poor. We've lost 8% of our GDP as a result of Brexit. We've got a welfare bill that is eye-watering and getting bigger and bigger every day. We've got a pension bill that's getting bigger and bigger every day. We can't afford the services we've got now. And I just think we should give the man time. He's only been in less than 2 years, and it takes more than 2 years to sort out the economy.
Do you think we're being a bit hard on him? I mean, he's made an awful lot of mistakes, has he not?
Yes, he has. But you look at the alternative. You've got reform. You take Mandelson, right? Mm-hmm. That was a disaster. But at least he wasn't convicted of treason like the former leader of Reform in Wales, Nathan Gill, who was a big supporter of Nigel Farage. Mm-hmm. You know, he's not trying to take away our human rights like the Conservatives are, like Reform are. And let's remember.
Well, they want reform of the European Convention of Human Rights. They want to withdraw from that. It doesn't mean your human rights will actually be taken away. They'll do different things.
I'm a solicitor, right? I know this stuff. If you repeal the ECHI, you're going to have to get rid of the Human Rights Act.
Yeah, but they'll bring something else in, won't they? They'll bring in a British Bill of Rights.
Will they, though? Will they? Yeah.
Well, I think they'd have to. They're not going to take away freedom of speech.
Well, we don't know that. You know, look at what they're supporting. And I'd just like to go on further from this. Forget the human rights point for the moment. Let's go back to the economy. Nigel Farage supported Liz Truss's budget. His Treasury spokesperson, Robert Jenrick, supported her in his leadership, and he also supported the budget. We can't afford our economic incompetence in the situation we've got now.
I mean,
we can't.
Okay. Who would you like? You know, you're in Wales. There's going to be almost certainly change in Wales at the Assembly election that's coming up in a couple of months' time. Who do you think could run Wales better and maybe the UK better, Ben?
Well, at the moment, I think Starmer's doing an okay job. I know he's getting a lot of criticism. He is sorting the mess. Do
you think he's sorting the mess out, or is he creating more mess?
No, he's sorting the mess out. Look at what he inherited. The Conservatives ruined the country with austerity, with Brexit.
I mean, those are both. Yeah, but you can't go on blaming the Conservatives. Definitely made mistakes. I'm not going to argue that point with you, Ben.
You can't.
But you can't keep blaming them. 2 years, then I would hope any Prime Minister would have made some progress. And also, you talk about the big...
Hang on, let me just rebut that point.
Sure.
They have made progress because they got rid of the two-child benefit cap, which is lifting 500,000 kids out of poverty. If that isn't progress, I don't know what is.
They never tell us about it either. They bang on about breakfast clubs. Ben, I do think it'll be really interesting to see what happens in Welsh politics. What's your prediction? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I will be voting Labour. I'm supporting what they're doing at the moment. But at the moment, I do think they're going to lose. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I think it's going to, it is on a knife edge between Reform and Plaid Cymru at the moment. But then again, do we want Plaid Cymru in charge because they voted against supporting workers' rights today this week in the Senate? So, it's just a difficult situation.
Ben, it's really interesting talking to you. You're the first person in a long time I've spoken to as a caller to the programme who has defended Keir Starmer. Keep listening, keep ringing. I'll talk to you anytime. I disagree with you, Ben, but in this programme we disagree without being disagreeable. I really appreciate the call. That's Ben in South Wales there. Alison says the thing you just aired about CPR and females and how modesty is versus urgency and life-saving is such an important issue. It's good the programme has highlighted this issue, says Alison in Northern Ireland. Well, thank you, Alison. I just thought it was an interesting story and absolutely had to be done. Pete says Starmer's followers still try to blame Brexit. That is typical. Alex says, I feel also as depressed as, I think he's saying, as depressed as what Leo was saying there. It's totally understandable. That message came in at the same time. Another person says, I love this country. I'm proud to be English and no tin pot government or its pals are ever going to take that from me. Another person says, Starmer harps on about divisions in the country. Doesn't he realise it's him and his party who are causing divisions with their Islamophobia bill? Damon in Wigan. Hi, Damon. Haven't heard from you in a couple of nights. Good to hear from you. I'm sorry, but I wouldn't attempt CPR on a woman purely because I don't know how the law would look at my actions these days. And this is a problem. I was trained in first aid. However, once I left the fire service, I wouldn't attempt it now. Funny world now. Thank you, Peter. Really interesting to hear that. Thank you, Damon. Joanna in Salisbury. Hi, Cardi P. Hi, Joanna. She says, I'd love to be your producer and tell you what to say in your ear. We would both probably get off-combed and thrown out together. Well, as I'm afraid, as some of my producers know, I don't always do what I'm told. Leslie says, is Jack wondering if it's day or night with your new evening slot? Is he coping okay? Miss you at weekends. Well, Leslie, thank you. That's very, very kind. Jack is fine. In fact, I've perhaps a little bit more time to spend with him during the day. This is my cat. And actually, in a couple of months' time, I'm getting a new lodger who's going to be working 9 to 5. And the lodger's a big cat person and is going to look after him a bit more, spend a bit more time with him in the evenings. That's happening in a couple of months' time. So that will be round the clock. He will be cuddled and stroked and given all his treats. He is a well looked after cat, let me tell you. Thanks to everybody who has been in touch, and perhaps we can give something to you because we're giving you the chance to win 2 hospitality tickets to the British Grand Prix on Sunday the 5th of July with full racing green trackside experiences. This is the ultimate setup for race day. You'll get exclusive grandstand seats at the Loop and Village Corners, plus inner track access to watch the drivers arriving at the paddock, and access to the hospitality shuttle bus for easy on-site transport, racing simulators and live music between sessions, all-day street food and an open bar. And that's actually during the time when I can drink Diet Coke. No, I still can't enter. Listen up, find out how you could be in with a chance to win.
For your chance to win, text TALK to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or call 0343 418 7260. Lines close 20th of March 2026 at 4 p.m. That's when you need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
conflict breaks out anywhere in the world, it has consequences here at home. Talk War is your definitive national security briefing. From the conflict in Ukraine to the tensions in Gaza and the latest escalation with Iran, this is where you'll find comprehensive comment and expert analysis with multiple updates throughout the day. The Talk War podcast from Talk, available on the Talk app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Carol says, while you're having your meeting with the creative people, can you ask them to do a trailer for your programme like Kev has? Yes, that's on the list. Don't worry, the conversation will be had. And Nat texted to say, you have my written consent to do a braless CPR, Peter. What a mad story. And thank you for that text. You get all sorts of messages when you're here on Talk, let me tell you. Let's go to Ken in London, who has some thoughts on Starmer. Ken's giving me a ring on 0344 499 1000. You're very welcome to the programme, Ken. What would you like to say?
Thank you very much, Peter. In my humble opinion, and I mean that, and I'm not a boastful man, I'm not a boaster, but in my humble opinion, our nation is fed up with disingenuous politicians.
Oh, you're absolutely right, Ken. Absolutely right.
This is a big trouble for the land. Our nation has been let down continually by dishonest politicians. I'm a Christian by the grace of God. What I believe what our country needs is an honest, truth-telling, born-again Christian Prime Minister, a man or a woman, preferably a man, because God wants men to lead. Not somebody who's not seeking personal popularity, but seeking the best for our country.
I mean, we've had some pretty religious prime ministers in recent years. Tony Blair was devoutly religious. Theresa May, very, very religious, very Christian, a daughter of a minister as well, went to church every Sunday. Both those prime ministers failed in different ways.
Peter, not one of these prime ministers ever mentioned the name of Jesus Christ. Not one of them. I've never heard any of them saying anything about Jesus. Lots of people say they're Christians. A genuine Christian talks about Jesus and believes the Bible. Now, what we see happen in this world, we've got a prime minister who is a God-hating atheist. He's rebellious against God. He's rebellious against our...
I don't think he hates God. I don't think Keir Starmer... I mean, you can level many criticisms at Keir Starmer. I don't think he hates God, Ken.
Every atheist hates God, Peter. Let's be honest. I'll tell you what
That's not true. I'm agnostic. I don't hate God.
Well, that's between you and God. That's just my opinion. I'm sorry to say. But what Starmer has done for the sake of his popularity and for his political life, he has surrendered to the Islamic ideals. He surrendered to Islam. How can this man allow, for the past months, Jew-hating Muslims marching through this land? How can it be allowed? How can it possibly, any Prime Minister, stand back and see, and I've been to I went to preach the gospel at most of the protests. An honest man would have said, we cannot have this evil anti-Semitism being spread throughout the land, but he hadn't the courage to stop it. So we need somebody who's honest, who's courageous, a man or a woman who say, I love Jesus Christ.
Well, most Jews don't love Jesus Christ. Or do they hate God too?
Say again?
Well, Jewish people don't believe in Jesus Christ. I mean,
they're in trouble with God too.
Okay, all right. Well, Ken, you've covered a lot of ground there. I appreciate the call. That's Ken in London. Paul's in Hartlepool and has some thoughts on immigration. Paul, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. I'd just like to say, before I go any further, just like to say, there is no gods anywhere. We evolved over billions of years, and it's just like the Chinese whispering. Throughout the decades and centuries, basically all these stories have been made up to keep the people under control.
There are 4 minutes left of the programme, Paul, and I need to speak to Ash. I'm not entirely sure we're going to get to the truth of is there a God or not. Tell me your thoughts on immigration.
Yeah, that's it. Basically, what they should do, anybody comes over on a boat, they should say right, give us your PIN to your phone to let me know where you're at, where you come from. They should say you're getting one crack of the whip, basically, to put your case over. If that doesn't work, you get no legal aid. So we're not paying all these people to keep them ticking over all the time. And so you get no illegal aid, you're just going straight out of the country.
Okay. Well, Paul, listen, thanks for your points. Appreciate that. That's Paul in Hartlepool there. Really appreciate everybody who has phoned in today. Can we see if we can take Andrea very, very quickly in Manchester, maybe even after I have a chat with Ash? I'd quite like to get Andrea's call in if she comes on the line. We're just ringing these people back. Of course, people ring in. You ring in on 0344 499 1000. We take your point and then we ring you back when we've time in the programme to have a chat with you. Ash is on after the news. Ash, you're very welcome. How are you doing? You all right?
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I've got this.
I should have given you an extra second.
Like a singer from Top of the Pops. Yeah, how you doing, man? You all right?
Very well. Yeah, it's all good. We've been talking about all sorts of things, including whether there's a God. I just had to clarify on air. I don't hate God. So God. I don't hate God, which is good.
Jerusalem was hit today, so God's going to be furious because that's like hitting his front parlour, isn't it?
Good point, well made.
So yeah, and it was near the Temple Mount, so you know they've got to be careful of that. There's some lovely buildings around there. They're probably listed as well, aren't they?
I would say so, yes.
They're listed in the Bible. Yeah, it's me and Andre. We've got Pete Barnes on. We're talking about Donald Trump. Has he won the war already? I don't think he has.
He thinks he has, anyway.
Yeah. And the Straits of Hormuz. No one talks about. They talk about the Straits of Hormuz. No one talks about the bent bit of Hormuz, do they? Is that why don't they block that one? Everyone's looking.
The triangle or the decahedron of Hormuz.
So, what do you think's going to happen, man, in this war? Because we thought it was all going to be over, and you know they're still a bit useful, aren't they? But not really. It's hard to tell, isn't it? Because it's only a 22-mile body of water. That's what seems to be messing up the world, isn't it?
Well, it is interesting because these little inlets, I mean, we think of the Suez Canal as well, what happened there back in the day, 60 or 70 years ago, and how these very important pieces of land and pieces of water can, as you say, just change things dramatically.
Exactly, it's like the middle of the world for some reason. I don't know why. The pro-Iran hate rally is going to go ahead, but not go ahead, and then they're all going to turn up anyway. It's a bit like the mods and rockers.
They're not allowed to
walk
process.
Yeah,
they're allowed to stand.
There's going to be trouble, isn't there? Well, let's hope there isn't, but you know. Because there's two sides to this, and why are we allowing it to happen? Why are we allowing our enemy who bomb our bases? Why are we allowing IRGC to be unprescribed? I mean, it's what crazy world we live in.
Totally agree.
We're talking about Mandelson, the cover-up. It's getting worse and worse and worse. Starmer knew all about it. He's misled Parliament. He's got to go, although, you know, there's no honour anymore, is there? No honour anymore.
Very few people actually resign these days, do they?
I think it was Robin Cook, wasn't it? Or was one of the last ones? And then he mysteriously died in the hills of Scotland.
I don't think it was too much of a mystery. I think he just had a heart attack.
You were in on it.
Yes, I hate God.